Is everyone up? Where's John?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Just by way of housekeeping for people who might be new to our meeting, just wanted to sort of tell you how the meeting runs. We will follow our agenda, and if you have any questions, please ask us after the meeting. We don't take comments from the floor. There is a public comment time. There was a sign up over there. You'll have your time. It will be uninterrupted. When you speak to us, we'll smile at you and we'll be very polite and listen, but we won't interrupt you or interact with you during your time. Your mic at the end of 3 minutes will stop working, so that's your cue that your time's up, and there'll be a timer on the screen. We do stay after the meeting as well, so if you have some questions you'd like to ask us after, please feel free to do so. You can always communicate with us. We want to talk to you. We want to hear your thoughts. All right, I'm in charge of the opening for the meeting tonight, and mostly I just want to give a shout out to our community. Really appreciate the opportunity to have public engagement. We appreciate your questions. We appreciate you bringing up different concerns. We, as a council in a city, we feel like we do our due diligence and we spend a lot of time researching, but there's always information that we can learn and that you can share with us. And so we really appreciate the respectful way that everyone has gone about that in terms of informing us, letting us know your thoughts and your opinions. And we really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you. So thank you for being here and for participating. I will say the opening prayer and then I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our dear Father in heaven, we're so grateful for this opportunity we have to come together as a city to discuss things that are important to us and that matter within our community. We ask you to please be with us. Please be with those families in California who are suffering such great loss. We ask you to please bless them and comfort them and provide opportunities for us to help. We're grateful for the leaders that we have and for the community members that are involved. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have 3 people that have signed up to speak to us. Audience, we would encourage you, please don't applaud, please don't boo, please don't do anything that would be considered disrespectful. We want to make sure that this is a safe place for everyone to share their thoughts. Okay, if you'll come up in this order, Briggs Lewis, Jason Largy, and, let's say Joyce. Joyce, yes. Please come up. When you come up, please state your name and tell us where you live. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Briggs Lewis, and
You gotta get right up to that microphone, they won't hear you.
I'm going to get saliva all over it.
That's fine.
Anyway, first things I want to address is the snow plow, and we clean our sidewalks. We clean out the thing in the front of the driveway, and pretty soon a snowplow comes back, and we've got a bigger pile than we ever had before. And one of my neighbors questioned the snowplow driver, "Why can't you turn your blade so that you don't put it in the driveway?" And he got really upset and growled at them. Okay? The other thought is that we seem to be going down the path that we want to look like Bountiful, or we want to be like Layton. When we moved here, we didn't go to Bountiful or Layton. We've been here for over 40 years. We wanted to live here. Now, if we make it look like Bountiful and Layton, I'm going to have to find I'll move to Bountiful or Layton. You know, don't mess with my city. It's home. As we keep messing with it, it's no longer home. Anyway.
Thank you, Brig.
Good evening, Jason Largy.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about isn't one of the agenda items topics, but just I'd love it if we could get any kind of an update on the train situation with the status of repairs that are happening, any information about a scheduling for a reinspection or anything like that. It's bad for everybody. It's a nightmare for us with our backyards right on the tracks, right close to crossings. It's maddening. And so it makes everything else get worse. So there's that. Just a couple things with the CRA. Again, I've said before, I've worked in acquisitions for the federal government. I do things like that. There's a lot of laws about acquisitions and spending government money, and I have to deal with all of those. They can be a pain, but they're there for a reason. They're there for prior fraud, waste, and abuse, things like that. One of the concerns I have with the CRA and redirecting money and getting these things is we're losing requirements on how we can spend money and rules and regulations. We're skirting those things. And we want to be able to do better, and everybody's got great intentions, but we just saw an audit on how we're spending money. It would be an agency that isn't audited and isn't included in those. The audit laws aren't covering that CRA. So those things are concerning. I do applaud that the board and the executive is going to be you, who I'm assuming, I haven't seen the budget yet, are non-compensated for that. I'm a little curious about that because most of the CRAs I look at, the executive directors are highly, highly compensated. So it's a lot of tax money going to individuals and not to those. So I applaud that. I'm hopeful that could stay that way. I hope that there's something written into the CRA for this, that it would have to stay that way or have to go to public hearing if it was going to change from that. Because there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse in that with other agencies that have done this, other cities, entities. California's had a huge problem with it, where they aren't even allowing them anymore in some areas because of the massive fraud that happened with them. And it's just the money. It's one of those things where if things go badly, I'm still concerned. I hope maybe you found out something about the lending, because again, my understanding is that banks, if it's in a CRA for a project, their lending laws are loosened, the restrictions or the regulations and the requirements to be able to lend are loosened, and they would lend to people and have to lend to people they might not otherwise lend to. Reminds me of the housing bubble, when there was no way that they could not lend to people who stated income that they didn't qualify for, and then we saw what happened with that. So if there's a problem with somebody who borrows money to do a CRA project and the bank has to lend to them because it's part of the CRA and whatever those rules are, and I don't know the details, I hope somebody else is doing that. But if that goes south, I'm 99% sure the bank isn't going to be left holding the bag. If it's somebody they would not have lent to otherwise, they're going to be seeking a way to recoup their money from the agency who identified the CRA zone and put those laws where they had to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Have sent you guys an email, earlier today, and Abby, thanks for emailing me back. I only wanted to voice my concerns. This isn't what I'd rather be doing, but not knowing if you would have a chance to read my email before tonight. But there was a lot of great things discussed at the last meeting, but one thing I felt like was kind of missed was us residents that live in that area. And talking further with Mike, I understand that my zoning's not going to change. No one's going to do anything any different than what they could do today, but it still poses for my home and everyone else that what your neighbor does also impacts greatly our homes. And we've lived here for over 35 years. We live directly north of the fire station, historic home, probably one of the first ones in Kaysville. And in that map, it's turned into commercial area. And it makes me really sad. And I've considered this my hometown, but wondering, do we just wave the flag and leave? Because I'm starting to feel like maybe we don't matter. I know none of you live on the old part of town, so I feel like our site over here is kind of underrepresented, I guess. But our home is important as well. And when they were talking about, I don't want to repeat myself in the emails, but if we're going to bring in 600 jobs, but traffic is the main concern, where's all this traffic going to go when we have 600 more people working here? I'd like to know in the poll that 10% of the city was polled a few years ago. How many of those people still live here? 10% is a pretty low minority of any statistic, in my opinion. So for 10% of the people to say, you know, we want money invested here on Main Street, but how was that worded? Was it, you know, is this multiple choice, and this is one of the ways I have to direct my answer? I know you guys have a big job, and you have to be really patient, and I appreciate what you do, but I just felt like I wanted to voice my concern that it's great to see our town change, but this is affecting a lot of people's homes, and our desire that, do we want to stay? And maybe, I'm not a regular attendee to meetings, but maybe you start pulling some of the people that are actively involved, what it is they want to have the city have happen, rather than just making random phone calls. And, you know, it could be a renter, it could be, who knows, but maybe some people that are invested to see what it is that we want to have happen. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. So great questions. We will answer them as we progress in our agenda. Right now, we have a presentation, Employee of the Quarter, which is presented to Kimberly Buck by Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Chief Oberg. I run the police department, as you know. I have with me Kimberly Buck. She's our support services supervisor, and she's receiving the Employee of the Quarter award tonight. I think you may recall my annual report a few months ago. One of the challenges I spoke about was our front office and trying to keep that staffed, and our inability to retain employees in that area. And that the feedback we kept getting was it was just too much work. And so we'd lose an employee, and then we'd hire another one, train them, they'd quit again, too much work. And every time an employee quits, we're left with one employee, and that's Kimberly. And so over the last 18 months, she's been the lone employee in that front office many times as we've gone over this challenge, and it's required her to stay late, work all her weekends, cancel vacations. I mean, she's done a phenomenal job, and really done it as kind of a new employee when this all kind of started. She was a fairly new hire as well, so she's had to learn many components of a job that I can't teach her because I don't know what those positions do either. So she's been a phenomenal employee for the police department and a huge asset for the city, and we're very fortunate to have her. So with that, I've got just a certificate and a check from the city, and I just want to congratulate her and thank her for everything she does for us.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Take a picture? Good. Would you like to say anything?
She does.
Oh, good, okay.
He knows how shy I get in front of a lot of people. It really means a lot. I just want to say thank you. Like I said, it means a lot, and I really appreciate it. And I'm thankful to be part of the Kaysville community. I've learned a lot, and I'm thankful for admin for believing in me and for their support, and especially for my new hire. I'm not sure where she's at in the back. Cindy, she's been amazing so far, so super happy about that. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We'd like to grab a picture with you. Okay. I'm so glad we have a room full of people to see these awards because we have outstanding people that work for the city, and so we're so grateful. Okay, Firefighter of the Year 2024, which will be presented to Mitch Probert. Chief Erickson will present this. Oh, I don't know, is he here? Yeah.
Mayor, council, city leaders, residents of Kaysville, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate it. It's quite an honor to be able to do something like this. It's probably the funnest part of the job, rewarding somebody for doing a good job and not just a one-off. Mitch gives it all every year. Here's a little bit of his write-up. Helping others. Mitch embodies willingness to assist others any way he can. He goes above and beyond with his crew and other crew members alike, whether it's stepping to cover a crew member or offering guidance on a project. He's always willing to do that extra. Proactive. Mitch is always, matter of fact, this is probably the worst one for me because I gotta reel him in quite often. But he does a great job as far as being proactive. Assigned tasks. He's got a great attitude. He's one of our firefighter paramedics. He graduated last year, a year ago this past December. Does a great job on the crew for us. His professional growth, he's always looking at new ways to do this and that. He's actually one of our fitness trainers. We have 6, Mitch? 5. So he's one of them. And he really just does an all-in-all good job on everything he touches. So it is my honor and privilege to award him the Firefighter of the Year Award for 2021.
Would you like to?
I'd like to thank my chief and my captains and my crew for dealing with me and the support of my wife and kids.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you. Chief, do you want a picture first with your crew, or do you want us to be in there too?
Hey, yeah,
Okay.
make sure Aaron. Hey, Aaron. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, come on, Aaron. Kids.
Yeah.
Come here, you.
Come on up, guys.
Come on. Oh, are you gonna be shy now? Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah.
I've never seen him shy.
Yeah. He's never shy. He's normally jumping off a recliner trying to suplex somebody. Hey.
Thank you all so much. This is exciting. Okay, now I have the pleasure of turning the time over to my friend and UTA trustee, Beth Holbrook, to present UTA's 5-year service plan in the Davis-Salt Lake Connector.
Thank you so much, Mayor. It's truly an honor to be here. For the record, Beth Holbrook, Utah Transit Authority. I'm the trustee that represents Davis, Weber, and Box Elder counties. And I'm here this evening to talk about some of our service increases that we're doing in the next couple of years. And I just wanted to give you guys some updates. Some of them won't impact necessarily in the shorter term, but in the longer term, we think that they're going to be a real value to the community. And I have the, where do I point? Oh. Thank you. Clearly that's me. User error there a little bit. So these are some of the changes that we are making. As you can see, UTA is really made up of it's a regional system, and we have multiple pockets of region that some have higher growth than others. And as we try to navigate the continued challenges to connectivity that we have, which is also growth, These are the changes that we are making. And for context, you'll see some of those red ones with lines through them. They are not as effective anymore, and so what we're doing is we are discontinuing them and increasing frequency in other areas. So this one is April 2025 is the timeline that all of these changes are going to happen. And for context, this is our first year of just doing one change day. We used to do them in the past according to school calendars, so typically August, but we found that our ridership increases to the point that it's constant, and so we're trying to keep it to one time a year, and then any ski service will just be its own ski service. So April 2025, this is the route that serves the Clearfield Station on Main Street, and it hits some areas in Fruit Heights as well. Some of this is a change because the major routes through Kaysville and all the cities north and south is the 470 and the 455, and you can see those numbers down there below. And the 470 is a connector that goes all the way from Ogden Front Runner Station all the way through to Salt Lake City. And the 455 goes from Weber State on south all the way to the University of Utah Research Park. And those are our main routes, and those are where the majority of riders are. However, we're finding, as you guys are probably aware, that some of the growth out west is making changes to how we need to navigate to continue to connect people. So we're starting to figure out strategies to do that. A lot of times what we're doing is making sure that we have adequate operators and that we have adequate vehicles in order to do these service increases. So post-COVID, we spend a lot of time trying to navigate both of those. There's a lot of changes in the manufacturing space for buses and everything else, but we're really trying to continue to develop our service. The next one is the 628, and this one is going to Weber State Davis campus, New Ames, all in these areas that you can see articulated. And what that's going to do is it's going to change that connectivity and go further west. West Layton is, as I talked to Mayor Petro, some of the things that they're doing is a development more on the western side, and I think it has happened in the past. In addition to that, they've actually, for those of you who now go to the Layton Temple, that road is actually now all the way through, which it did not do at the time. And so as we look at Gentile Street and we look at all of those other locations, we're finding that we need to modify and add service as well. One of the things that we are really trying to focus on is frequency. Frequency is one of the key things for connection because then you don't have to wait quite so long for your next connection. And by the way, if there's any questions or anything else, please feel free to interrupt me. I am an interactive type speaker, so that would be great. So the other major changes are going to happen in 2028. For those of you who are familiar with our Ogden Bus Rapid Transit, or OGX, that is an all-electric bus service that goes very quickly. It's 15-minute service from our Ogden Front Runner Station through to Weber State University and back. And we are also proposing something very similar to that for South Davis. And as we continue to develop our ridership, right now we have ridership on the 470 and the 455, those two numbers that I told you that go north and south. It's around 4,500 riders a day. We anticipate with these changes it'll be up to 6,000 riders a day. This is going to change how we also look at service, and we're going to create a multimodal area in Farmington Station. There's a lot of development out in that western portion as well. And so as we are continuing to connect better and more frequently, these are one of the changes that we have. And for context, all of this information is online, and our website is rideuta.com, and you can just do a / and you can put 5-year service plan, or you can put Davis Salt Lake Community Connector, which is a super long name, I know. We haven't narrowed it down with the next yet, but we plan to. So what this is going to do basically is the 470X, the Davis Salt Lake Community Connector, is going to have 15-minute service all day long from Farmington Front Runner Station all the way through to Research Park. And one of the things that has been done for anybody who goes downtown to Salt Lake City, Second South has become a dedicated bus corridor lane. So they, basically our buses are on both the, on the far right side, both as you head east and west, which means we have very frequent service on Second South. It's about every 5 minutes, sometimes even less. And as we continue to navigate this, we feel like this is going to be one of our key projects prior to the Olympics. The connectivity that we have to create is we have to provide this service to our residents. And although, yes, we do have the Olympics coming, we want to make sure we can add additional service. The reality is that we have to also make sure that we're serving as we continue to evolve every day. In other words, if you're going to your job, you want to make sure you continue to have access, even if there are large events going on. And there will be some other changes as a result of this change in service and frequency. These bus stops will be branded with whatever we come up with, not the Davis Salt Lake Community Connector, but a shorter version of that, and they'll all be branded for that. And that the reason for that is to keep that identification really firm in people's minds that this is a every 15-minute service and that they can continue to utilize that and connect right down to those areas within Salt Lake City. There'll be some local service changes that will be in Farmington, Centerville, and Bountiful, and as well as heading up onto Main Street. And eventually, they'll probably get to Kaysville as well. It's going to depend on where we see things moving forward in terms of not just growth, but connectivity. Sometimes it sounds like those words are interchangeable, but really what we try to make sure that we're doing is that we are now listening to how people are connecting. And a lot of times, what we used to see is that we would have, like the freeway, we had a rush hour, morning and afternoons, and we used to see that a lot. Now we do not see that. We see our service is constant all day long, and it actually picks up at around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, which is a unique scenario that we have not really had in the past. So what we're trying to do is really address some of those continued lifestyle choices that people are making. Certainly people are connecting south is the majority of what we are seeing, but that's not the whole entire majority. As you know, there is Northrop Grumman, I apologize, MIDA area as well by Hill Air Force Base. It is a huge draw, and it continues to be so as they continue to develop. And I know that as Roy City looks at their development patterns and Ogden does their airport improvements, there's going to also be continued changes. So like I said, this is a 5-year service increase, and things can change. And that's why we are presenting it. The first 2 years are pretty much there, but as we get out, we have modifications that we can make. That was a really long explanation for you. Thank you for going with that. Here's another new route that's going to be proposed. This is the 600, and this is going to be this is going to impact Kaysville because you're going to see this route in some of the areas as well. Anything north of Farmington, which is now in 2028 will be considered a multimodal hub, the 470 will still exist. But we need to do continued connectivity. And so if you look at those dots, that's where some of the connectivity is going to be as well, the black dots. The northern portion of Davis County is going to be a focus for us in addition to the west portions as well. And this, again, is another route, 609. This is 30-minute service that's going to connect to all the park and rides along the D Event Center and Farmington Station as it goes through on the east side of all of these communities. And the 455 for Farmington is going to stay, so that's not going to be a change. But you are going to see changes if you head south, and that is one of those big changes, is that we're going to discontinue that once we have our Davis Salt Lake connector in place. So these changes, that's why they're on 2028, the anticipated change of us developing and finishing the Davis Salt Lake connector. And again, just for context, a bus rapid transit is really it's a vehicle. It's going to be an electric vehicle, just like OGX is all electric vehicles. It also is going to have what we call TSP, which is Transit Signal Prioritization. So as that bus reaches close to an intersection, it will keep that light green for that bus. And that is really designed to obviously maximize connectivity again. And all of our BRTs or anything with an X at the end is going to have that installed in all of those vehicles. And let's see, these are just the discontinued routes. Again, this is south of Farmington, but I really just feel like it's important for you guys to understand that because you have residents who go all over the valley and you want to make sure that you're not like completely sending them in the wrong direction. But of course, you can always send them to UTA, so. With that, any questions, I am happy to answer as best I can.
Trustee Holbrook, I have a question. So right now, Kaysville has 470, 455, and then we'll have 600? Okay.
Correct.
So there'll be additional stops in Kaysville, or will they just be rerouted on different lines, the existing stops?
That's a great question. At this stage, there will probably be 1 or 2 stops. We're not quite sure what that's going to look like.
In addition?
In addition,
Okay,
yes. And again, it's going to depend on connectivity. We do a lot of analysis, and there are far wonkier people than me who do this analysis, and they really try to determine patterns of movement. And that will probably, they'll identify those stops as it gets closer to that time frame.
Is that something, is it a conversation between UTA and the city, or does UTA just sort of say, okay, these are where we're going to put our stops, and then let us know? How does that process work?
That's a great question. It's a little bit of all of the above.
Okay.
Part of what we do, because we recognize that cities want to make sure that they're doing everything that they can, and we really support that. So we want your input.
Okay.
And then we also have to take that input and then layer it onto a regional aspect and make sure that we are serving as many as we possibly can. So we try to incorporate that. And I'll just give you an example. For instance, in Syracuse, sorry, I just had a mind blank there for a second. In Syracuse, they have a lot of growth out there, and they were letting me know where they were going to be putting a Costco. And that's really helpful information to me. I know you're not surprised, but nobody takes a bus to Costco. So when I know that there's a Costco there, I know that I don't have to put that as a particular thing. And it's mostly because everyone's filling up their cars.
Right.
It's nothing against UTA or anything else. That's just kind of how those work. But in the interesting dynamic, Walmart's very popular with our services. So it is really just a matter of trying to understand. It's a little bit of psychology, little bit of regional, and a little bit of local, all of the above.
Interesting. True, you have to carry a box.
So any other questions that I could answer?
Any other questions, council members?
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you so much for sharing these plans with us. We appreciate having the ability to reach out to you. And
What was the name of that technology that causes the light to stay green again?
Oh, good question. It's called TSP.
TSP, and how can I have that installed?
for John's personal
I do
license
get that
plate.
question
Just
too. so-
follow the buses?
Yeah.
And yeah, don't tell us the secret because yes, people have started to follow buses, but I will not ever say that too much out loud. Sorry, everyone's behind me, aren't they?
Right. We have a room full now. We all know.
Transit signal prioritization, and
Okay.
so that's going to help us to be connected more. So
Good to know. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
All right, council, do we have any conflicts of interest to declare? No? Okay, we're good. Let's move to consent item number 5A. Well, actually, consent item 5A and B. Does someone like to make a motion about that?
Mayor, I was re-reviewing the minutes again late last night, so it was kind of too late to get it into the actual packet. And I found, hold on, let me find it in my notes here. Sorry, in,
We
here we go.
applaud you for reading at night.
The minutes of, let's see, page 8 of the minutes for December 19th, paragraph 5. In there it says that I said that I felt like there were sufficient protections in place for the old downtown area. But I think what I had said was that I was concerned that there weren't enough protections in place. And normally I wouldn't bother with a small fix, but since it's like the opposite meaning, I just wanted to bring that up. Do I make a motion to approve it with that change, or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then.
Actually, I think you'd make a motion to take it off the consent agenda, right? And we have to have a discussion, or no? We're okay this way? Okay.
Okay, sorry, Emery. I'll just make a motion then that we approve consent items A and B with that change.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you for that. Thank you for looking at that and noticing that. Okay. That's great. All right, let's go to action item 6A. An ordinance enacting Title 17, Chapter 38, Car Wash Standards of the Kaysville City Code. Kick this over to Melinda.
Mayor, members of the council, always a pleasure to be here. About 6 months ago, the council decided to put in what's called a temporary land use regulation to allow staff to do research, look at best practices for car washes. It's no secret that we have had some recent car wash additions in the community. Those created some issues, and so the directive from the council was to look at those issues, put an ordinance in place, and see how we could best address those. So that said, we did do quite a bit of research. We've looked at ordinances from Florida to Texas to California and Ogden, St. George, and there are a variety of ways that we could regulate car washes. However, looking at the resources that we have and, you know, the need to focus on, to not create like a landscape ordinance specific to car washes. We wanted to just take a broader approach. And so the ordinance that's before you this evening is quite simple. And again, we went through a variety of iterations with this. But in the end, I'll go through the ordinance, but we wanted to just keep this as simple as possible while still protecting residents who are in our community. So we added definitions, and I think those are fairly obvious. As you know, the automatic car wash is the one where there's some type of automation mechanics that take you through a tunnel car wash, or where the bay doors close. And manual car wash is your wand car wash that you just go in, you squeeze the trigger, and then vacuum stations are commonly associated with both types of those car washes. So in response to concerns that have actually taken place over the last couple of years, we put in, with car washes and the amount of car washes that we have on the east side of the city, we did put in an ordinance, in place that restricted vehicle-centered businesses to be along 200 North and Main Street, and that would include a car wash. But with this specific ordinance and the proposed regulations, we would just say, you know, we're very saturated on the east side with how many car washes we have, and there isn't a need to add any more, so we would prohibit car washes east of I-15. Anywhere else in the city, they would be allowed. However, we're proposing that they are prohibited within 300 feet of a residential zone or a residential use. And we're proposing we measure that distance in a straight line. How we came to that distance is, we looked at other communities' codes and how they treat car washes in relation to residential zones. Ogden City has a number of commercial zones, and the car washes are only allowed in major commercial areas and not like neighborhood commercial areas. And so they regulate theirs through the zoning that's applied to the property. We don't have a neighborhood commercial zone. We have 3 commercial zones. And so that is something that really wouldn't work for us. Fort Worth, Texas requires 500 feet between a car wash and a residential use. When I worked in another municipality, we had issues that came about after a car wash opened up, and I did some measurements from that car wash to the areas where we had impacts to the residential, buildings that they were townhomes. That distance was right around 300 feet. I did some measurements with some of the concerns we had here when Mr. Car Wash opened up a year ago, and those distances were consistent with right around 300 feet as well. So we're proposing that we implement this regulation of not allowing a car wash within 300 feet of a commercial, or excuse me, of a residential zone. Full disclosure, that eliminates quite a bit of the commercial property, the zones as they exist, because there are homes very close to those properties. So from an economic development standpoint, you know, we hate to recommend prohibiting businesses, and that's not what this is. We're really putting in place protections for our residents. But to just kind of give context to the value that a car wash brings to Kaysville, it's not much. Mr. Car Wash, their property taxes were to the city about $2,200. The new car wash, Charlie's Car Wash, they pay about $2,000 in property taxes to the city. So there's really not yield. There's no sales tax that come out of these businesses. And so from that standpoint, as community development director, I don't see us harming potential revenue sources if we put these protections in place. The remaining part of the proposed ordinance just covers some standards. If it's an automatic car wash, we want to have somebody on site during business hours. Most of them do that anyway for the automatic car washes. We want to have vacuum stations that have on-off switches. There is a certain amount of noise that's generated from those vacuums when they are left on. And so that can help further reduce noise. We would want to have vacuum stations would have to meet those same distance requirements as the car wash, so that 300 feet. And then we are proposing that we also do not allow amplified audio systems at those car washes. And then lastly, we're going to require that any proposed car wash has adequate stacking ability. So I've seen places in, like the day after a big snowstorm or rainstorm, everybody wants their car clean. And I've seen instances where this is backing out onto major corridors because there's not enough queuing area for those vehicles. And so we would ensure that any other car wash that comes through would be able to have that queuing ability to keep it off of the streets. That's a public safety concern. So this was presented at the Planning Commission meeting last week. We did not receive any public comments on this item. The Planning Commission voted unanimously 6-0 to recommend the City Council approve this. Based on that, we are recommending that you approve the enactment of Title 17, Chapter 38 Car Wash Standards. And any questions you may have?
Okay,
Let me
thank you. We don't have anyone signed up to speak to this, so we don't have any public input on this subject, but I do have a question. So residential / mixed use would also, any sort of residential existence in a zone, right?
Yeah.
So mixed use would be included in that 300
And technically,
feet?
your mixed use zones are a commercial zone where we're allowing the addition of a residential use. And so there was specific intent with how we worded that.
Okay.
That it would, that it's a residential zone or use.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, our residential zones just don't include our commercial areas, but that mixed use is a
Covered
commercial
under
zone.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And nothing would prohibit, if a car wash were to exist and then somebody wanted to rezone property and put something in next to existing residents, that's kind of a different outcome. If the homes are there already, the car wash is there already and homes come later, that's a little bit of a different scenario as well. But we may have an incident where that 300-foot distance might not be applied just based on the kind of direction or the order of how that development takes place. So again, if there was a car wash that existed and somebody wanted to rezone to residential, that would go through the public process. But I think we could, if the council felt like it was appropriate to rezone that, certainly could do that. It just would make the car wash a non-conforming use, which is really okay. Just wouldn't meet those requirements of that 300 feet.
Okay, how about if a current car wash wanted to expand east of I-15?
Yeah, so they would not be allowed to expand. Putting this in place would make any car wash that exists east of I-15 into a non-conforming category, which, for the good of the audience that may not understand some of these legality terms, a non-conforming use is a use that at one point in time was legal, that it was allowed based on zoning code, but zoning code changes, and that makes that particular use what we say a legal non-conforming use. So it was legal at one point in time, but because that zone, either the regulations in the zone or the zone was changed, it's no longer a conforming use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Oaks.
No, and along that same line, and I'm just thinking of a couple of in town that are east. Legal non-conforming, we as a city would never take anything to change them or put that out of business, right? Because it's legal non-conforming.
Yeah, yeah, and really that happens again in two instances. Either the regulations in your zoning code changes, or the property where that particular use is located is rezoned. Usually those rezones come with a project, but we have had so many calls in our office over the last couple of years on the property 23 East Crestwood. And so that's just a few parcels in from Main Street. It currently has a house that has been used as residential for as long as that zone has been in place. Still can continue as that residential use, but if they came and said, hey, we want to do an addition onto the back of this home and expand that non-conforming use, we would not permit that. So to go back to that earlier question, if an existing car wash wanted to expand and they were within those regulations of east side of I-15, or that expansion would put them within 300 feet of a residential zone, we would not allow that.
But they could remodel, upgrade.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they can upgrade, maintain their property. We're really just kind of talking about a footprint of, if they wanted to add a second tunnel or a fourth bay to an existing car wash that had 3 bays. Those are the types of things that we would say, it's a non-conforming use and we wouldn't allow that.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions?
Just one quick
Councilmember
question.
Adams.
Yeah, one quick question on the measurement from straight line from property boundary to property boundary. And I'm thinking of just like one possible situation where there could be a commercial zone or commercial use. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you talked about like the property boundary of where the residential property or residential use ended, and then if it's 300 feet before the actual car wash is built, does that qualify, or are you trying to say that you need like a 300-foot buffer before the boundary of the next? Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say, because I guess I don't know how they read when they put in, like, if there's say there was a dentist building and something else, and then the car wash, but it's all part of one commercial property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if that car wash then were to be within 300 feet of a residential zone, it would not be allowed.
But if it's past the 300 feet, but do you understand? I guess I don't know quite where, when you talk about the property line, versus where the actual car wash is located?
So one of the challenges with these types of regulations is when you don't define how you would measure them. So let me just kind of show you, and let's just go to, okay, this is an old aerial. So Mr. Car Wash is right here. What we would do is we would go in and measure, you know, from here. I don't know, it's not measuring. But we would measure from this property boundary and then take that in a straight line to the next property boundary. Right, there's a number of ways you can measure these. Some of the state code with like alcohol proximity lines, they'll say it's the ordinary pedestrian path. In this instance, we just want to look at those property lines, and I would measure from, you know, property line A to the parcel that they were looking at putting a car wash on, and we would just ensure that within that 300-foot distance that there wouldn't be any homes that then would not allow that car wash to go in. And I don't know if I'm quite answering the question that you have.
No, I mean, I think, I have a hard time knowing the difference between, I know the difference, obviously, between a property line. I guess I see, like, you know, maybe the parking lot might be 100 feet of parking lot between, like, does that get included as part of the 300 feet distance, or?
Okay, yeah, so no, we would just look at property line to property line.
Okay, got it.
So we would not measure to where the building, and there's a reason for that, which is when people come in and ask and they're inquiring about what can I do and they're putting a rezone in, they generally don't have a site plan, a site layout at that point. And so I would not have a reference point to go in and measure 300 feet from a building that doesn't exist to, you know, a property line. And so the safest way then to do that is just from property line to property line, because we just don't know where on a site a building may sit.
And is that on all four sides? So, or does it just, you just measure to the nearest residential neighborhood? And that would
I think the answer to that is yes. We would look at like all four sides of the property to make sure that, right, and really what we're trying to do, and it's regrettable we didn't have something like this in place, but what we're trying to do is protect our existing residents from the negative impacts that can be created by car washes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Adams or Blackham? No,
Mayor?
no questions? Oh, Councilmember Hunt.
Oh, if no one, and whenever they're done over
Did
there,
you have
I just
something,
also
Mike?
have something.
Just the way it's worded, the way it sounds to me is how exactly I would interpret it. It would says that if I have a zone is the actual line, okay? That's not the building. The zone is the zone district. It's probably the edge of the property line. So the way it's written, it says the use itself, the car wash itself, the walls of the car wash have to be at least 300 feet from the zone. So that would be the R zone. But if I'm in a mixed-use zone, what it's saying is the building walls have to be at least 300 feet from, say, a townhouse that's part of a mixed use. So what they're looking for is the definite definition of getting the distance of 300 feet from any type of a residential use. So, like you say, but the way it's worded, it says that 300 feet is measured to the zone district, which would be the actual edge of the zone. And then the use, if it's in an area where there's a residential zone, then you would measure 300 feet to the use from the walls of the car wash. So you're getting your 300-foot distance.
Is that how you intended it? Because it sounds like
That's
it's
exactly what it
not.
says. I think it's right. I think the way she's worded it is exactly
okay.
how you would.
Well, yeah, and then so we're saying within 300 feet of a residential zone, and again, all of these properties have a property boundary, so a zone or the property boundary itself, and then we are including in that conforming residential uses as well.
Right, and you could have a mixed-use zone where, say, there's a gas station with a tunnel car wash on the end of it, and it might be a mixed-use zone that has townhouses, but as long as those townhouses are at least 300 feet from the edge of that car wash, then it would still be allowed to be in that zone.
I would read the code that same way. Councilmember, thank you.
Councilmember Hunt.
Okay, thanks. So I like where this is. My only concern, we were talking about conforming uses before, and my only concern is in the prohibited section where it's within 300 feet of a residential zone or a conforming residential use, because it's my understanding that if a property that's residential gets, rezoned as commercial, that it is then non-conforming, correct? And another, tell me if this is right, I may be confused, but if, say, the city needed to take an easement on a property that then made the setbacks non-conforming with the zone, would that also make it a non-conforming property?
Well, an easement really, right-of-way would, because right-of-way is ownership. An
Yeah.
easement, the ownership still is maintained with the property owners, just allowing a use of that area. So I don't think an easement would have any impact.
Okay.
But if, and it does happen, sometimes roads get widened, and then the setbacks are not conforming any longer. But that would be a non-conforming building, not a non-conforming use.
Okay, but the rezone would change it to a non-conforming use, right?
Yeah, if it was a residential property and it was rezoned to commercial, unless, there are some limited instances that a residential use could be allowed in a commercial zone.
Right.
An example of that is mortuaries, right? They live on site, that's allowed in our commercial zone, but there's a conforming residential use that is, a necessary allowance of having that use so that those services, right? They get up in the middle of the night to go to hospitals, to care facilities, to homes, to pick up individuals that have passed on. And so there are instances where there could be a conforming residential use, but it's not in a residential zone.
Okay. I guess for me, just because there could be some instances where, of course, the city doesn't generally rezone property underneath someone's home, but if that were to happen, I almost feel like people would be like, well, you're just rezoning it so that we can stick a car wash next to me and make my life miserable, so I have to leave. I know that's like 5 different steps, but I don't see any reason not to protect non-conforming residential uses. So whatever the rest of the council thinks, but that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
But really good point. And we do have residents here who are concerned about their CRA, their home being in an area that could potentially become commercial, which could then impact the neighbors behind them. Really good points. In that situation, if someone's in a residential area, they want to rezone their property to commercial, this 300 feet would still apply to the neighbors behind them to the side of them, right? Because it would be 300 feet of residential versus a commercial car wash. So that would not be prohibited, right? A car wash would not be prohibited in an area that was residential, gets rezoned to commercial next to them.
If it was a 300 feet distance, then it would be allowed.
Okay, within 300 feet.
Yeah.
But that is, give us an example of 300 feet. I have a really hard time understanding how big that is. Is it a football field?
Thank you.
I'm obviously not a sports person. Okay, 300 feet is the length of a football field.
Yeah, and a lot of times our city blocks are like 400 or 500 feet.
Okay.
So
that's quite
yeah, the length of
far.
a football field.
Okay, and then if we wanted to require for a proposed car wash, a fence, et cetera, that would be in the development agreement, for clarification, right?
Yeah.
If we decided to additionally enclose an area.
Yeah, we actually had quite a bit of dialogue about, should we include a regulation on here with the standards that would require a fence? But going back to, so as we thought through this, let's just talk about the Costco parking lot in Bountiful. I think probably most of us here are familiar with that. If in, some area in that parking lot, they wanted to put a car wash in, I think it would actually be more aesthetically detrimental to have that property fenced off. A fence would be, you want to protect your neighbor from, from impacts, whether it's noise, trespass, people walking through their property. If it were to be in a, giant commercial parking lot, I think requiring a fence would make the development feel worse than, and the value of having that fence requirement really isn't there, because we're not preventing people from going from, a car wash to a residential home behind it. And that's certainly, we can certainly add in the requirement of a fence if the council wants to do that. We just, in the end, felt like with that 300-foot distance, that fencing really would not be as effective as if we were to allow them in closer proximity to residential uses.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have any thoughts on that or opinions? No? Okay. And it could be done, just so everyone who's maybe listening or cares, it could be done with the requirements that we would add to a development agreement specific to the project. Okay. All right. Anyone else with comments or questions on this ordinance? No? Okay, then I'm ready for a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve an ordinance enacting Title 17, Chapter 38, car wash standards of the Kaysville City Code.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Do we have to have a second for a friendly amendment, or can we request a friendly amendment?
I'm trying to remember.
You can request,
I think you
sorry.
can do it now.
Yeah, she can request it.
Okay. Councilmember Oaks, is it okay if we remove the word conforming out of 17-38-2, number 2, just so that non-conforming residential uses are also protected?
Doesn't matter to me, as long as Melinda and Nick, who isn't here, say it's fine. Yeah.
Then I'll second, if that's on there.
Okay, so that was a friendly amendment. So we have, does everyone know what we're voting on? Do you feel comfortable with what? Okay. Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you, council. All right, 6B, an ordinance adopting the Kaysville City Center Community Reinvestment Plan and Budget. I know everyone's here to talk about this and to learn about this. And so I will turn the mic over to Jason, who will introduce this topic, and then we will go to people who have signed up to speak to it, and then we will turn the time back over to the council.
Thanks, Mayor. Melinda and I thought we could kind of start this off by answering some of the frequently asked questions. There's been a lot of questions, but hopefully that we can answer some of the most commonly asked questions and clarify a lot of the questions that have been asked. So first of all, a lot of questions about what the vision of the CRA is and what's really driving this initiative. So I apologize for people that have maybe heard some of this before, but we go back to the 2022 general plan, which talks about enriching the city center and the downtown area, and that was one of the key guiding principles. So that was one of the reasons why we started looking at this as a city, kind of as we drive down, for example, Main Street in Kaysville. It's apparent that there are certain properties that just haven't seen a lot of investment in a long time, and several decades in some cases. And so the idea behind this is, what can we do as a city to try to revitalize some of these older buildings, some of these areas that just haven't seen any growth or redevelopment just through the normal market. And so the CRA helps us to capture some funding that would help us to put back into Main Street and to the downtown area to help that along. And another part of this also is just the idea that if we can capture more sales tax in Kaysville, if some of these buildings were performing better and had more vibrant businesses, we might be able to capture some sales tax, which would help with the city revenues. Sales tax is one of the major sources of revenues for all cities, really, and if we can keep our residents, shopping and eating in Kaysville more often than saying going to Farmington or to Layton. That helps us, it helps pay for city services, and it helps us to become less dependent on property taxes as the main source of revenue. So that's an important part of this as well. Another question we've heard a lot about is just what is a CRA? A lot of people haven't heard this, what this is, or not heard that term before, and wondering, is this something new? Our neighboring cities, have they done this? And just a little quick history on this. CRAs go back, tax increment financing goes back 50 years in Utah, started in the 1970s. And there are hundreds of these around the state. In fact, virtually every city in Davis County has a CRA, a community reinvestment area. Just looking at the list, Bountiful, Centerville, Clearfield, Farmington, Fruit Heights, Layton, North Salt Lake, Woods Cross, Syracuse, West Bountiful, West Point, and Kaysville all have existing CRAs. So this isn't something that's kind of a new idea. It's a very common tool that the state has given cities to help stimulate economic development in their cities. And just so speaking of Kaysville CRA, the city of Kaysville did a CRA, as many people know, on the Smiths area property that's called the Flint Street project, and that was done in 2013. And just kind of an example of how CRAs function, or just kind of the mechanics, because I think this is one of the most confusing points that people have about what a CRA is and what it does. So just taking the Flint Street project as an example, again, that was done in 2013. And that encompasses what is now the property where Smith's is, and those businesses on that corner, and then the property immediately behind it. And so if you look at what happened there, in 2014, that was just a field, and it was generating $37,000 a year in property tax. And then once the development came in, and all those buildings went in, Smith's and the other commercial businesses, that property started paying $137,000 in property tax. So it literally went up $100,000 in property tax because of the increased value from the field to the businesses. So the valuation went up, and naturally the property tax went up. And so what happened there with the CRA was that extra $100,000 of property tax that Smith's was paying, rather than just going back to the city and the school district and the county, those taxing entities were able to voluntarily forfeit for a period of 15 years that additional $100,000 of revenue. Rather than going to them, that went to the redevelopment agency, which was able to help do projects to help that area. So for example, that $100,000 extra went to help widen Flint Street and do some other infrastructure improvements. And so that is all a CRA does. It's a mechanism for collecting that increment that can be used then for stimulating economic development. It doesn't rezone, it doesn't give authority to increase the tax rate. The tax rate stays the same before and after. The only difference, again, is that it allows that increment to be captured and redirected. So hopefully that explains a little bit about how it works. Of course, any kind of property tax would have to go through the truth in taxation process. Only the city council can raise taxes, and again, that's not part of what the CRA does. Got some other questions. I think Melinda's going to kind of tag team here and answer a few others, so I'll turn some of those over to her.
Yeah, so I just pulled a few slides from the presentation on January 2nd, because there still has been some, question out there as to what a CRA does and doesn't do. So we want to ensure the public that a CRA, it does not increase or impact the property tax rates. It does not impact any zoning. The typical zoning, noticing and zoning process, a rezone process would have to apply if a property, whether it's inside or outside of the project area, it still has to go through the same process. It goes to planning commission, it goes to city council, that's all done in a public meeting. There is no obligation, requirement for any property owner in the project area boundary to sell their property or redevelop their property. That's not something that we would force on someone, which leads to the next bullet point. So state law does give government agencies the power of eminent domain, which is the process of condemnation, that would not be allowed to be used for economic development purposes. There is a small exception to that, which basically is if one of the council members owned property and they agreed to having eminent domain used on their own property. That's the only instance that state code would allow eminent domain to be used in relation to the community reinvestment area. So we want to just, again, provide some very high-level details. The project area boundary that we're proposing is 261.5 acres. Most of the property in the area is currently developed. Only 15.5% is vacant. And that's one of the things that makes this a redevelopment project versus like a greenfield initial development project. 18% is currently used as a residential use, and then 66% is commercial. The major streets associated with the project area are Main Street, 200 North, and then Flint Street. This map up here is taken from the 2022 general plan that identified these areas of the city were where residents preferred to see some type of city center or redevelopment. So this next slide just kind of goes over some of the potential uses for any increment that we capture. There's Main Street, we have beautification improvements or even other improvements, sidewalk improvements, pedestrian-oriented atmosphere and facilities is something that was repeated over and over again in the general plan, which is based on feedback from the community. So there was some preference for residents to see some type of pedestrian-oriented opportunities within the city center area.
Hey,
Parking,
Melinda, could
yeah.
you give a few examples or an example of that, of one of those items?
Well, and before you do that, I'm just gonna, so just so everyone knows, these are potential things. Nothing has been decided, no projects have been identified. We don't have to do these things. It's just to give the CRA, through the application process, an idea of, well, the taxing entities, okay, what could possibly be used, this money be used for? And so it's not identifying, we're not saying we are absolutely doing sidewalk improvements or we're absolutely doing a parking enhancement. So I just wanted to make that clarification, that these are potential things, but they are not identifying things specific. That will all happen.
Actually,
Yes.
I'll let you keep going and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah, so Mayor, you're absolutely correct on that. This is a list of kind of anything we brainstormed could possibly be a need. When we take this plan to the other taxing entities to see if they're willing to support us and enter into an interlocal agreement for that tax increment to be captured by the RDA, we want them to be able to know some of the potential uses that we would have for those funds. It's important for them to know what that could be so that they can make an informed decision. The list here doesn't mean we would do everything. Might be a couple of things. There could even be items outside of this scope that could, well, that aren't like specifically identified within this. So we're talking about Main Street improvements, but we could also do improvements to another street. And maybe that's not specifically listed in here, but that's why we have traffic circulation, parking studies, infrastructure upgrades. So there's a variety of ways that funds could be used. How those funds will actually be used is, for the most part, yet to be determined. And if the CRA area is created, some of our next steps would be to put together some policy that would guide the RDA in making decisions. We would want to reinvest those funds into commercial uses. I wouldn't recommend that we have people come into the city all the time that want to rezone properties for townhomes or for apartments, and that Generally doesn't happen. But that said, if there was, you know, an applicant that came in and said, hey, I want to do townhomes, if they didn't have any type of a commercial element to that project, we would have a policy in place that says, you know, we just don't support residential projects, because we are trying to increase the property tax base, the sales tax base, and so that commercial element is important. And then just real quick, some of the basics on this project, or this proposed project area. We are committing as the city that we would defer 80% of the increase in that property tax revenues for 15 years. The city would keep 20% of those. We are asking this taxing entities to participate at a rate of 40 or 60%. They would keep 40%. The project area would be in existence for 15 years. And 2025 would be, we've been working on this for quite a while. And so generally you have a trigger year a couple years out from when you approve a CRA. We've been working on this for quite a while. So if it's approved, the trigger date, and that just means the date that we start capturing those incremental revenues, that would be 2025. There is a projected amount of 5.1 million that would come to the RDA, and in any case, the county, when we spoke to them about an interlocal agreement and their participation, they wanted to see a revenue cap. And so there's not an instance in where we would receive more than $10 million in that increment. And if that happened within 5 years, I don't see that happening, but then the project area essentially expires because we've met our cap on how much funding we could receive.
So, Melinda, since this has taken so long, and we're halfway through 2025, so, because normally I would think 2025, fiscal year 2025 began last July, correct?
Well, so this is based on a calendar year. So the county operates on, I mean, their fiscal year is the calendar year. Okay. So their budget starts July or January 1, goes through December 31. That is for the calendar year. And the county collects those property taxes. And so if 2025 is the trigger date, what that means is that, you know, next March, April, when the county is processing all of the property tax payments, that would be, I mean, it would be this property tax year that those incremental revenues would be captured off of this year.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, and that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
So this slide just shows projections that our consulting firm made to how much revenues could possibly be received over the 15 years. So this is the amount of incremental revenues that all of the taxing entities, you know, would be about 8.3 million. Because we're splitting some of that and saying, hey, keep 40% taxing entities, the 20% stays with the city. What this ends up being in regards to how much funding would come to the redevelopment agency, it would be about 5.1 million. There are some administrative costs that we would have 3% of what's generated would go to administrative costs. For the city, the county would also require some administrative costs be reserved to help them with the efforts that they have to do to calculate the TIF payments and you know, essentially write checks over to the redevelopment agency for those funds. So that's really kind of what I wanted to cover. I know that there's been a lot of questions. There's been many emails circulating out in the community with information that's not coming from the city, and some of that has been inaccurate. So some of the efforts that we've put here tonight with our FAQ that has been on our website for several weeks, but that was distributed tonight, is to try and help provide good factual information to our residents. Some of the other questions that have come about is, I think, what is largely a confusion between a banking act that the federal government put in place in the 70s called the Community Reinvestment Act. And that is a banking regulation. It really is not related to the state code 17C, which is the Community Reinvestment Agency Act. The words are similar. They're actually identical words, but one's a federal banking regulation. One is our ability to put together a project area and defines how we go about with that. So just to ensure that we were accurate with that distinction, that there is no direct link between that federal banking act and what we're doing here. I consulted some colleagues that I know have been doing this kind of work for longer than me, and we went back to our consultant that had done the work on this, which is Zions Bank. Although they are a consulting portion of Zions Bank. So everyone I spoke to confirmed that there is no direct link between that federal lending act and the creation of our project area. There's also been questions about where does the money come from? Well, the money comes from the property tax revenues that are generated, and those that have agreed to come from the city, that 60% or that 80% that goes to the agency rather than the taxing entity. We would not go and bond for what we think the projected increment is. We wouldn't ask for that. We just essentially patiently wait for those revenues to come in and build up until we may be able to do something with the revenues. And there's also been questions about, well, how do we protect the city? How do we protect that revenue source? And the answer to that is through, as I mentioned, policy. We would want to put some policy in place. We do that with agreements that have protections in there. And majority of the time I have seen the agreements with a participating entity, whether it's a business that you're trying to bring in or an existing landowner, those agreements are what we call a post-performance agreement. And so we would have in that agreement, look, if there's no increment that's generated, you don't get any increment, because we want to make sure that we're not promising or giving away money that we don't actually have. The second thing that we would do is say, look, yeah, we're going to agree to provide some type of funding assistance. In this case of Smith's Marketplace, the city put the infrastructure in. But we would ensure that, and the infrastructure over in Smith's would have been needed in any case for the property to develop, whether it was Smith's or some other entity. But we would say, okay, we like this project, it's got a commercial element. We feel like it matches what Kaysville is. It meets all the definitions of what we would like to see. And we would include in there, you have to deliver what we want. And if you don't get any money. And so their reimbursement, post-performance reimbursement, is how I have done these in the past. So we do have mechanisms to ensure that if there's no money generated, we're not spending that. We have assurances, we would put assurances in place to make sure that we get out of any type of an agreement with a developer, property owner, that we get what we want out before we go and give money to that project or that property owner. So we've also had some questions about what specific projects were the CRA approved. At this point, we don't know, because first of all, the project area doesn't exist. Right, we have a list of items that we think we may spend money on. We went over those earlier. But we don't have a crystal ball to determine who within this property or project area would want to redevelop. And so those types of questions really can't be answered at this point, because we don't have a project area that's been created, and also because of that, we don't have people coming and asking for money because it doesn't exist yet. So I think that was primarily what I wanted to cover with the council based on the last couple weeks of questions and comments that have come in from the community. And there are, I think there's 5 items between our city council agenda and the RDA agenda. Really, the information I've just explained and what Jason has provided is applicable to each of those agenda items. So if there's more questions the council have, Jason and I are prepared to answer those.
Okay, Jason?
Mayor, if I may, I wanted to add some additional clarification on the property tax. It was asked, for example, wait a minute, what happens if a property adjacent to me does get redeveloped? Does that somehow affect my property value now? And that's going to, inadvertently, indirectly affect my property taxes. So, for example, the example is thrown out there, what if the old Benyon Craft building is developed and something nicer comes in? Do the homes behind the old Benyon Craft building now have to pay more taxes because, wait a minute, now they've improved that property, so does that all of a sudden make everybody's property around it worth more now? And that is a potential, for example, and especially on the commercial side, some of those commercial properties across the street, if there's something more attractive now across the street, maybe that commercial property now across the street from Benyon's is worth a little bit more. So there is that potential. We don't see that, though, so much with residential properties. So the residential properties behind Benyon's Craft, for example, would unlikely be affected. In fact, a lot of times it's just the opposite concern that a lot of residents have that say, wait a minute, if you're going to improve that property and something nice comes in, is that going to generate more traffic now? And that's going to actually hurt my property. So, but the answer to that question is it's very, very unlikely that the residential properties are going to be negatively affected by increasing their property values. So just wanted to clarify that. The other question that I've heard a lot, and I think it was asked too in the comments earlier this evening, was is there an audit of this? Does this get included in our audit? And it does. We have an annual audit of our city budget. That audit also includes the CRA. The city is required every year to provide a report to the state, and all those reports statewide for CRAs are listed on the governor or the state's website. You can see all 635 reports out there, but that's something that's closely monitored and regulated, and the state does a good job of that. So wanted to answer that question as well.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to also add that, just to explain to everyone, this is an opportunity for residents in Kaysville to be benefactors of the county and the school district and other taxing entities, so that when we have projects in our city, the whole, everyone who's shopping in our city and shopping and living outside our city can benefit, can help us benefit from that. For example, Jason had the list of all of the cities in Davis County that currently have CRAs. When you go to Station Park, you're contributing to their CRA. When we go and shop, when we go to the theater and we go to the restaurants, they have a CRA for that area. And so we as community members are helping them create their infrastructure and pay for it. And that's a cooperative effort. And so the idea that Kaysville is trying to do something illegal, unethical, immoral, stupid is a really, it's not true. I don't know how else to say that. This is an opportunity for everyone who is in the area to be able to contribute to the development of an area. And I was talking to someone earlier, and she said, well, redevelopment to me means this. It means you knock everything down and you start over. And I thought that was a really good point that she brought up. Redevelopment means different things to different people. To us in Kaysville, redevelopment means if I'm a property owner and I am located somewhere in the city and I have a tenant that comes in and says, hey, I'd love to do business, I'd love to lease your building, but you need to fix some things. And me as a property owner, I'm like, ooh, okay, well, I would need some help with that. Or if a developer comes in and said, when we talk about infrastructure improvements for Smiths, that's water, sewer, power lines that needed to be upgraded in order for that facility to exist. And so development anyway it naturally probably will occur eventually. It's true. Over time, maybe. But when we look around Kaysville, there are some areas that just really haven't changed, and that's okay. I've lived in Kaysville a long time. We're not trying to change the city. What we are trying to do is bring some opportunities for people who already live here to be able to eat here, to be able to shop here. And so when we talk about CRAs, it's an opportunity for the whole community to reinvest in a community. It doesn't mean that we're asking any property owner to demo their building or to change the use. We're not asking anyone to rezone. What we're asking for is, hey, here's an opportunity that everyone can help contribute to. We're helping other cities. We're helping Syracuse. Syracuse is growing a lot. Our kids just moved there, and they love it. And there's some really cool things. They're getting a Costco. They're doing some things that aren't Kaysville, but they are great for Syracuse. When I've talked about Main Street in Bountiful, what I'm talking about is, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, CarMax was a Main Street attraction in Bountiful. It was a little diner slash a malt shop kind of place. There was a fire. And when CarMax burned down, Bountiful Main Street just kind of became a little bit of a deserted place until they reinvested. Now, I realize there's also townhomes there and things that people in Kaysville don't necessarily want on our Main Street, and we agree. So when I talk about Main Street, I'm talking the cute little boutiques. I think it would be awesome to have, in fact, we have a wonderful sweet cakes bakery, is that what it's called? Yeah, so she was on Main Street in Kaysville, and, well, not on Main Street, she was in Kaysville on 200 North, and she moved to Bountiful because it was so cute and quaint, and there were some other cute shops there, and it was a better deal for her. And so those are the kind of homegrown kind of things that seem like that's what we want in Kaysville. We want our businesses to thrive. We want other new business owners in Kaysville to be able to thrive. We don't want to compete. We don't want to put anyone out of business. This isn't an attempt to get rid of anyone. It's a tool that we can use as a community to reinvest in our community and to be able to continue to have things that we want here. You know, it would be really fun. I know we don't want Kaysville to change. We don't want it to change, but over time we would love to see it improve. You know, we want to look pretty. We want to have a great community that we all are proud to live in. And so this is a tool that allows us to help allow us to do that. There's been a rumor that, you know, if the city does this and someone gets a loan from a bank, then they go bankrupt, then the city's on the hook for that. That is not true. Certain cities could enter into an agreement where they agree to back some financing. I don't believe that's our intention here. And you'll know it if it is, because everything that happens is in a public meeting. The RDA is in a public meeting. We, as council members, are board members for that RDA, but our meetings are public, just like our city council meetings. And so everything that we do, every decision that's made, will be made in front of an audience, as it should be. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is we appreciate your patience through this. Council members, do you have anything that you would like to add before we turn the mic over to those who have signed up to speak? No? Okay, all right. So if you'll come up in the phone.
Mayor,
Yes.
if you would oblige me, just one more thing that I failed to cover. And first of all, thanks to all of you who are here this evening. It's wonderful to see that our residents care about the community. We received a grant of about $130,000. The city's going to contribute about $10,000. So we are about to start a process to study in depth and get community feedback, property owner, business feedback of what we would like our city center area to look like. So when you know, some of the questions about what's driving this, why are we doing this? Well, it was identified in the general plan that this is something that residents would like to see. This small area plan is then taking a more thank you, look at the, you know, the city center area and really digging in on a, you know, nuclear level, not nuclear, whatever, a smaller level than we were allowed or able to do with when we're talking about the entire city. So everyone who's here, if you are open to participating in that project will probably start in March, and then you're going to be directly contributing to what you want to see in these areas, how you want it to look, things that you don't want to see, things that you don't want it to look like. So look for information about that I think we'll probably kick those public meetings off towards maybe the end of March at this point. But that is a fantastic opportunity for every member of the public our council members to really define what we want our future to look like. So I think that's really important to put out there, that we do have this opportunity to really define that, and then we would take that information from the plan. That data would be what we would use to drive policies that the RDA would implement for any funding opportunities and all of that, so.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. Several have mentioned, well, we don't want Main Street to have a raised median. We don't want Main Street to change. If that's the case, then this is a great opportunity to engage. We have talked to people over the last 5 years, but it's been 5 years. So if that's not what we want now, great, now's our time. Getting this approved, it's our hope that the school district approves it. That would be the next step. It just gives us a tool in our toolbox. And so it gives us some tools and a little bit of money potentially, because like Melinda said, the city's not going to go take a loan. A bond is a loan. We're not going to go take a loan out for potentially $10 million that we don't have. The money is accrued over time. So if projects all of a sudden get redeveloped and something exciting happens, great. If not, we're going to have to wait 15 years as it incrementally comes into the city. And so I think that was a really good point of clarification either. So if you don't want Main Street to change, let us know. Personally, there's several of us up here that would like to see the old library building restored. It's been vacant now for a long time. This money could potentially be used to create something there that the community could use as a community resource kind of center slash museum slash community space for a tree lighting ceremony, for example. So these are all potential things that we're talking about. And if we don't have this tool, we have nothing to talk about because we don't have any money that we could possibly use. This is a way to not raise taxes. This is a way to not burden our community and still reinvest in it. So now, thank you for that. I will, if you'll come up in the order that you signed up, feel free. You'll have your 3 minutes, and we appreciate hearing from you. John, yes, no? So I think, didn't you sign up? Okay. So John Sanders, Lorraine Starkey, Val Starkey, Becky Hope, and Jill Dredge. Thank you. Oh, Scott.
I thought Scott was coming.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Scott, I think crossed his name off. Did you cross your name out?
I signed up for the next item. Is this that item?
This is it. This is the budget. Yes. Yes, Scott. Okay, sorry about that, Scott. Come on up.
Well, it is crossed out.
It is crossed, yeah.
Now, maybe I crossed it out.
No, I crossed out and signed up for C, but
Oh, okay.
whatever. If this is the time, then
Okay.
thank you. And thank you for this opportunity. I've spoken with some of you, and quite honestly, I came in with my anxiety level lowered until I just listened to the presentation. Because everything was talking about commercial redevelopment, but there's been nothing said about residential properties that are being affected. My property is one of those on the west side of Kaysville on 200 North. The creek that runs through Barnes Park runs directly into my back piece of property. It's a separate property than my residence. My residence is on the south end of that property. And my concern is, and I've been told my property taxes won't change, but in the example that you have in your questions, FAQs here, gives an example of the increase in value as this project develops. So I've never been a part of a CRA before. I've never had to worry about this. Smith's was developed using the CRA, but now my property is being included, and it just increases my anxiety level that I'm going to end up paying extra taxes at a commercial rate rather than this piece of property, which is not zoned for residential even. It's under the it's under 20,000 square feet, so it's not zoned for residential property. It's literally a non-buildable lot. Have a letter from a previous city manager stating that, and my concern is that I'm going to go from the tax rate that I'm currently at to a commercial rate, which could possibly, as this project develops, because we fall within the CRA. According to the survey that was done, it didn't include this section of Kaysville. It was other areas related to commercial development, redevelopment of commercial properties. So you've got a lot of people here whose anxiety is very high. I know there's a lot of misinformation that's floating around. I would just ask, I want to understand. I want to know exactly how it works, and I appreciate the time that's been spent, but I would ask that we be given an opportunity to table this for 3 or 4 months, and we can have additional meetings like happened Monday night where Abby came and answered questions, and we can visit personally with you just to help us through the time period of that we need as residents to understand this project, so our anxiety levels will come down and be where it needs to be as we have more information. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Opportunity to talk to you today. John Sanders, longtime Kaysville resident and business owner, and owns several properties on Main Street. And I applaud the council for trying to do what they to make things better in Kaysville. I will tell you that my anxiety has been lowered a little bit because, and I've learned a lot about this tonight. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings on what's going to happen. And it sounds like you're just applying for a loan or an opportunity for the businesses to develop and do better. I was one of those back 42 years ago. My family had an opportunity to take advantage of a community development grant or redevelopment grant. And about 42 years ago on Main Street, there was a large fire and it took out half of Main Street and some of our portion of our business and several others, and they were able to take some of that money and get a low interest loan and redevelop those properties. And so I think that's sort of what you're proposing is kind of a low interest loan so the businesses can do that, and I think that would be a great thing. One of the things since I signed up, I wanted to address is maybe I'm really concerned about the traffic flow, and I know it's not really maybe Kaysville City's deal, but the state road, but I'm really concerned about turning that Main Street, especially the area you're talking from 2nd North to 1st South, into a slower area to slow it down and put a crosswalk in the middle and all that. There's already a crosswalk now, but to make that even slower, if you've ever been there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you get all these high school kids and other traffic coming from I-15 coming, and when I-15 plugs up or 89 plugs up, it all diverts to Main Street. That's going to be a total disaster. So I'm sure you've already thought about that, but I wanted to make sure you had that in your agenda. And then one of the things that Tammy, or Mayor Tran, has already said is I would really love to see a community event center. There is really no place in Kaysville to have community events. I have a scout troop that I tried to get a place to meet, and there is no city buildings that we can have at all. We can't meet in community, the church houses or anything. So if we don't have a place to meet, we have nothing. But that's not a place maybe for us, but it's also for maybe having community events, and we can have a museum there, and we can have maybe even some other things like we could have some restaurants and things like that. But it's just a matter of getting the word out that we want to do this and help the community. But one of the things the city really needs to address that really bad is because that's going to go bad. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful. I just wanted to start with all of the research that I've done, and the very first article that I read today was about a lady in St. Louis that was concerned about tax incremental funds in her city, and she became an expert in 3 days or 22 weeks or whatever it was. And her problem that she was looking for was trying to the idea is when I choose to vote for someone or an action, is it increasing my government size? Is the government choosing versus the market value, namely, what would happen. I found an article that was published in 2022. That's the legislature, an audit of the tax increment financing, which includes community reinvestment acts. That is the same CRA because it is in Utah, and it basically talks about, my husband looked up an article today that says if it's too good to be true, then maybe it is. And so if there are no downsides, then maybe we should be looking to see what the challenges could be. And this tax summary basically says that one of the big problems throughout the state with the hundreds that are involved are that there is a lack of showing. The reason that it was a Community Reinvestment Act was begun in 1977 by Jimmy Carter is to help provide economic opportunity for blighted areas, namely when there were not fair ways of showing the people that did not have money could increase their development. And so the word is blight, and the other word was to show the but for. And that is one of the problems that they're showing. The but for was saying to justify what is blighted about Kaysville. I've heard some property owners and business owners tell me that there is nothing blighted about Kaysville. They really think it's not broken and that we can try to do the best we can to keep it, to develop it and let it revitalize without a lot of, the biggest problem that the other thing with the audit is to say that the local governments can pick winners or losers. And that can be a concern. There are people, business owners, that are saying, will they pick me? So we care about them. I'm not a business owner, but I care. Pass.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I want to ask if Ron Barton is here. Not. Kimball Clark? Not. I have 3 or 4 points. I don't understand where the money is coming from. If it's deferred tax money from the schools, I have some concern. Because whether it's 5 million or 10 million, page 4 has a total of potentials of 12 million. So if it becomes 12 million, even if it's strung out and 60 or 80% comes from schools, how do the schools make it up? Okay? We have a lot of schools that are topping out. Population of children is decreasing. So maybe there are ways. The next thing I would say is we keep hearing that the taxpayers won't pay anything extra except maybe business owners, but the money has to come from somewhere, okay? So when I see these numbers on the printout, it says 5 million. Back on page 4, it says 12 million. When you sum it up, and I'm thinking like, okay, if we don't do loans, that was helpful, but where's the money coming from? For example, we have a $5 million item in there for a parking improvement. We've heard rumors that there might be a parking garage. I can't imagine a 2 or 3 story parking garage being 5 million. I think it's much, much more. So, question. Thank you.
Thank you, Val.
Hi, Mayor Tran. Hi, council members. Thanks, my name is Becky Hope. I'm new to this board, but I'm not new to boards. I have been going to the Davis School District Board for a long time, and I just want to give you guys so much credit and kudos. Thank you for being respectful and kind and letting us come and speak. That did not happen over there. It does not happen over there. There is a definite feeling of resentment between the board and parents over on that side, so I'm happy to be here. So then coming, I made a ton of notes tonight because I'm kind of new to this subject. And it was great. I was at the meeting where Member Hunt was the other night, and I wish that there had been so many other community members there, because I think that I know that they need to know this information. I know that you guys have been working on this for a long time, but while we were in COVID, everybody's lives were kind of spun upside down. And so I think just in the last year, people have actually started to engage. And so I love that you guys were saying that now moving forward, we're going to have public meetings and people can come and really have a say in this, because it sounds like it's probably going to be approved. So moving forward, people will be able to come and have a say. But how can we do that? How can we really engage the public? I tried to get parents to be involved for the last 3 or 4 years, and it is almost impossible. And people just don't want to pay attention. But then it was really hard figuring out, how do we reach people? And so I had been talking to my school board member, who I appreciate, and she's newer to the board. But I asked her, I said, how do you reach out to your constituents? How do you let them know what's happening at the schools? And she said, well, I don't reach out to them. I don't have their emails. And I thought, what? And so she said she doesn't have a way to reach out to all of her constituents, and I think that's a huge problem. So I'm not sure how it works here, if you guys have an email list for all of your constituents, and you can, and I don't know if any of you do this, you send out a monthly newsletter that says, hey, this is coming up. So, and this is where the meeting is going to be. I don't know if we need like a hot air balloon that has all of the wording hanging out the sides. Like, how do we get people involved, and how do we get people to pay attention? Social media, I think, works. I think mailers probably aren't the best. A lot of people see that, get the mail and toss it, right? So I am excited about this moving forward because of the community engagement that you guys seem genuinely open to. So I'm hoping that you'll let us know what your thoughts are on how to really get this information in front of people and really say, you need to pay attention to this, because it's not really anybody's fault that everybody doesn't know this information, because I think the ball has been dropped on a lot of ends and people just aren't paying attention, but they need to. So I had a different public comment ready to go, but I think I just want to see how you will really engage the constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Jill.
On? Okay, there we go. Thank you. I kind of get more and more confused as I listen. I was up at 3 o'clock last night reading about TIFs, reading about lots of things, and I think that's one of the problems here. I'm kind of going to go off script. I had somebody wanted me to ask some questions, but when we talk about these other cities, we see high density in every single one of them. When we talk about Farmington, look what is going up over there. My understanding is that part of the money that came there came from California school tax. I mean, it's kind of alarming. I think the other problem that a lot of people are having is that we're asking, what are we buying? And you're saying we're going to be doing that. We're going to be coming up with that. I think that's one of the problems for a lot of people, is it's like, what are we buying with this? Another one of my concerns, as some of you know, I've had communication with 2 bankers that are outside of Zion's, and they're saying quite different things. And I know that there's a conflict on which CRA we're talking about. We definitely are talking about a TIF, right? TIF, tax increment. And according to the bankers, both of them, these things can be sold down the road. That's a huge concern if it is sold down the road, and that's what can open it up to high density. And I think that's one of the main concerns in Kaysville, is we don't want to look like Syracuse with high density all the way down Main Street. So maybe what we need to do is get together and have some bankers that are not from Zion's, because they're involved in it, but some bankers that are retired, whatever. The bankers I've talked to have worked with RDAs. So this is where it's very confusing when I hear the discrepancies, because they really are quite different. I got a little bit of time to ask the questions that somebody wanted me to ask. And that was one of the reasons, asking a banker why down Second North was included. He said that is so that it can look more appealing to a future possible person that would want to buy the CRA. Okay, this was our main questions. Again, it's where does the money come from? Does it come in piecemeal as CRA projects come online and the incremental tax is collected? We've kind of talked about tonight. Or does it come from Zions or other financial institutions using a $5 million present value calculation? If the money comes from a bank or other financial institution, typically what is done is that the bank creates a financial instrument that they sell to other banks, which we're talking about, which use it to offset the CRA obligations. When that is done, the issuing bank prepares a credit memorandum which discloses potential risks. And I read about this last night at 3 in the morning. That is part of a TIF. They do have pros and cons, and I think that's one of the things that people really want to know. What are the pros and cons with this? Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, council.
I mean, sure, I'll go.
Councilmember
I don't-
Oaks.
If that's,
Absolutely.
I go first a lot, and that's okay. Now I got to read my own handwriting. That's so, as my understanding, and I've talked with a couple of folks on there, I mean, Kaysville City currently has 0 plans, no plan at all, that we would co-sign any loans with any developer who might want to use these funds. And Jason or Melinda, correct me if I'm saying anything that might be incorrect. That's, that's, okay. I did have a question for either Melinda or Jason. The $500,000 that talks about for housing, it's about $35,000 a year if it went by the 15 years. Why? What would that be? What would that specifically be for? It seems like it should not be part of the CRA.
So state law requires that when a CRA area is created, that 10% of any increment that goes to the agency has to be set aside for affordable housing. That could be used in a number of ways. Probably about 8 years ago, the state required any city who doesn't have a homeless shelter in that community to pay into a statewide homeless support fund.
Mitigation fund.
Yeah. So we don't have a homeless shelter in our community now. This is like one of the worst topics we could be talking about right now, based on the last year that we've had. But we don't have a homeless shelter in our community. And so we have to pay into that state mitigation fund. I don't know what our amount is. It's population-based.
It's about 101,000.
It's how much?
101.
Okay, yeah. So we could use that housing set aside to make that payment to the state, and then that doesn't come from the general fund. We could use that. So one of the things about the affordable housing set aside the state requires is that it can be used anywhere in a community. So it doesn't have to be used within the project area. It could be used anywhere in the community. Our intent would be to use those funds to create a down payment assistant fund for city employees who may not be able to live in Kaysville without some type of down payment assistance. That could change. We have not put that plan in place, but the state requires that 10%, and that's where that 500,000 is coming from, right? Because we're estimating we might get 5 million, and so that's a requirement from the state.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And
Barry,
and
can
we
I
as
follow up with that?
I was going to say, we as a council, please, but we as a council or as an RDA board would really make that final determination on where or how we'd want to utilize that. Is that okay? Sorry.
Can I cut in just real quick before we get off topic, because I'll forget? As far as like down payment assistance, does that include school teachers? That would be like police, fire?
So I would recommend that we start with city employees. That program hasn't been created yet, so it could be extended to others, but frankly, $500,000 is not a lot of money.
No.
And so, if we want to have our public works, our water staff, our snowplow drivers, our police, fire, even we had, the front office staff in the police department. This could go to any city employee. So we can design that, however the council and the future of the RDA would like that to be done. But I think extending that to other public employers would be tricky, and I think we should prioritize our own staff first. But that's really the prerogative of the council to decide how that program would be created.
So TBD.
Correct.
Okay. The next thing I had, I think Lorraine, you brought up, they talk about, blighted. And I would agree. I don't believe that there's any part of Kaysville, having driven around it many times over the 15 years we've lived here now, would be considered blighted. But it's not just blighted. It's also aged or in need of an update. And there's a good portion of the areas we're talking about within the CRA boundaries, which I would call aged or in need of an update. All you got to do is walk out in the daylight and walk down Main Street, walk to Tasties, and there's a good portion of the area that could be said would be in need of an update. Val, you talked about on page 4 the different projects. Those were total 12 million. Yeah, I did the same math, and I'm sitting there, well, how in the world? But as the mayor said, those were at the time, during brainstorming session, that here's some areas we think might be needed to be done. Here's what our estimate is at the time, and those estimates have increased, I'm sure. That's not a inclusive list of here's what we want to do. Those were ideas, I think, to get the juices flowing. And as we go forward, I think there's lots of other people and individuals, who would come in, here's another idea, here's what we want to do. And if the money's not there, it doesn't happen. It just flat out doesn't happen. Or it would need to happen a different way. I'd love, what are the best ways to reach out? I've heard from numerous individuals, residents, that we're just finding out about this. We don't know. And I guess I would give that to all of us on the council and staff. What is the best way? And it might be there already, but what is the best way to reach out to the residents of Kaysville for their input and to let them know what's being decided? If they're not around or don't have an input, here's what we're doing. I think that's on us, on figuring out what the best way with our resources to do. And Jill, you had the question on, if banks sold a loan. Well, I know that when I've had a lien on my house, usually that lien is sold within a year or two. I don't understand, how many times with your mortgage, who in here has the same mortgage company now that they had the same one that when you bought your house? I'm impressed. Usually it's within 2 years it's been sold. And then 2 years later it might be sold again. But I don't know, and I'd be interested in talking with you, how in the world, by selling that loan, it would allow a different project to come in. That I don't understand, and I don't know that if I have a contract to put something or develop a piece of property, and that loan is sold, that someone then can come in and change it without coming to the RDA or coming to the council for a change in zone, or I don't, my limited understanding, I don't know that could happen just by selling the loan. And I don't know that there's a person in this room who wants to see high density come in along 200 North or Main Street. There are areas we're trying to do. I mean, we all voted just a year ago for the hotel and the apartments that will go behind that. There are areas where they're appropriate and they'll get the state off our back for a little while. But I don't think there's a person in here who wants to see them down Main Street or down 200 North. And and I took way over my time. I probably took Abby's time, too. So, sorry, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Oaks. Who's next? Councilmember Jackson.
Appreciate all of you being here tonight and the presentations tonight. I felt like there's definitely more clarification tonight than the last council meeting, and we purposely kind of delayed just so that we could have more discussion and hear from you. Gotten a lot of emails, so thank you for all the due diligence and work that you've all done as well as the city. Yeah, appreciate comments from Councilmember Oaks and other colleagues that are going to be speaking up here. You know, there's so much to address that I want to mention and also ask. So several folks have talked about property taxes, and they're worried about their property taxes going up, being increased through development. If anything, from the get-go, the reason why I've been interested in this is to keep property taxes low. We have so many needs as a city. It's actually very surprising, like the major infrastructure needs that the city really requires. We have water pipes, sewage pipes, we need roads. We're redoing 200 right here, and that's been in the works for years, and that's going to be a very costly project. We need water pipes that we need to completely replace that are millions and millions of dollars so that we can continue to have fresh drinking water. And so the idea behind the CRA, and I know the mayor's done a lot of work to talk to businesses and appropriate businesses that would fit within our culture here in Kaysville. The whole idea is to bring in more revenue so that we can keep property taxes low. We have one of the lowest tax rates in the county. And it's pretty amazing that we've been able to keep it as low as we've had. And it's been very challenging the last few years with me on here watching all the hoops we have to jump through to keep our taxes low. Really, we could raise the taxes every single year and we would still be behind, but we have purposely kept them low. And I applaud my colleagues up here as well and the mayor for kind of leading that effort. And so this whole notion of, you know, Smith's was mentioned. There was a lot of uproar around that. And, you know, there's always a risk to all these things that local government does, but that has been such a huge blessing in our community. And it's brought in so much tax revenue, and that helps us to keep other taxes low. And this is similar to that. My thinking going into this is, yeah, let's see if we can get some funding to try to enhance our city, try to improve it, try to bring in businesses that fit. Now, the question was asked, like, why would the school board do this? Why would mosquito abatement do this? Why would the county do this? And that's a really good question. Why would they do this? Because ultimately, we're working to potentially capture these funds, but these are the entities that are willing to give up these funds for a period of time. And I believe that it's probably because they all need more funding. Our schools need more funding. Our mosquito abatement, all these entities need more funding. And so this is a way to invest in the future and to hopefully capture back more of those funds in the future. Melinda, would that be a fair statement to make?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the end, if the project area works the way it's designed, at the expiration of that 15-year time period, our taxing entities should receive more revenues than they would have without that increment being reinvested in the area.
Okay.
So they're motivated to do it because in the end, they do defer for a period of time, but in the end, those revenues are likely to be higher because, like in the instance, right, it's very simple to understand that in terms of it was Greenfield and now Smith's is there. So their property tax revenues are increased because there's been a site that's been developed, or again, if a site's redeveloped and the value of that property brings additional tax revenues to the entity. So it may be, and the entire time, if the project area is created, the taxing entities receive the same amount of property tax revenues today that they receive for the next 14 years, 15 years. They're held harmless in that those that same amount is delivered to them. The set aside comes from that new revenue that's generated. Sometimes that's just through simple appreciation. That's just how the economy works. Other times, right, and in this instance, it would be likely that increase comes because we've improved properties and put, you know, buildings in that are generating that property tax revenue. So the motivation is there because in the end, they should receive more after that reinvestment is made and the project area expires than they would without that having been in place in the first place.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Well, thanks for answering that. And I have to say, Sweet Cakes, I'm so sad they went to Bountiful because such an amazing little bakery. The owner has celiac disease, and so everything in there tastes amazing, and it's all gluten-free and all that stuff. And
It's my happy place because I can't have gluten, so.
those are the type of things that we want to keep here. We're not talking about big box stores that will completely change the city. We're talking about stuff that will fit with our culture. Benyon Crafts, that is a huge opportunity up there to do some mixed use. And maybe, man, I would love to see a Trader Joe's come in there, honestly. I think that would fit nicely and bring so much revenue. We would have pristine roads and sidewalks and all this stuff. But that's just me. I want to see better roads and better infrastructure. So those are a few things I just wanted to mention. Something that's really important to me that this gentleman brought up is his home. You know, when I saw that on the map, I was surprised because I just don't think any homes should be included. And there's so much fear. And I feel like if those were not included, we wouldn't have had so many worried people here. And so I really would like the city to speak to that. Can we remove those homes off of the area? Because to me, it's crazy. Like if my home showed up, I would lose sleep over it and just be out of my mind.
So those homes were included because typical redevelopment patterns happen when you have residential uses along very busy streets and those uses discontinue. We have several examples all along Main Street of homes that are now a doctor's office or an insurance office. My guess is because over time people didn't appreciate backing out onto Main Street. So looking forward in 15 years, is that potential of those properties being redeveloped there? Sure. Will that happen? I don't know. But the reason why that was included is because having the frontage of both sides of a major corridor are the most likely places for redevelopment to occur. But again, that only happens if a property owner wants to sell their property or they want to do the reinvestment themselves. So there's no obligation for them to do that. I can understand the concern of being included in the project area, but really if you have no interest in redeveloping or selling your property, there's no obligation for you to do that.
And so to that point.
Well, so.
Okay, we don't do that in our meeting, but thank you. We understand that's what you'd like us to do, so.
So to that point, those zones, they're zone like R1, they're probably R1 zones, right? Or they're residential, zone
Yeah,
residential.
They're probably the R1
And so
zones.
anyone that would want to come in to do redevelopment, if one neighbor says, I want to sell my house, and a developer comes in, it would come to city council. The city would have to open it up, hear from all the property owners. They can't just change the zone.
If they wanted the property to be rezoned, sure.
Yeah.
But if they just wanted to sell their property, that's not a transaction we're involved in.
Okay.
But if they wanted to have that property rezoned, yes, it comes to the Planning Commission, City Council, we send out notices. To answer the question of, could we take those properties out? Sure we can. We, however, would have to start over with our whole public noticing process, renotice. We send out over 400 notices. And we'd have to go back to the county and renegotiate terms with them based on the change in that property area or that project area boundary.
Do you foresee the county having issue if we took off? There's not many homes we're talking about.
No,
Okay.
I don't think they would have an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, that's really helpful. Appreciate that. And then,
May I?
Yep.
Along that same line, that property would not ever be rezoned by the RDA or by the city to a commercial property tax rate, correct?
Unless there was a request for a rezone.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we don't traditionally go out and rezone other people's property. They come to us and submit an application, we process an application.
yeah, I just heard that as a concern and wanted to address.
Yeah, that can be done, but in my time, I mean, I've been in government for 25 years. I've never been a party to the municipality or the county government going and saying, hey, homeowner or property owner, we're going to rezone your property. They're just really, most of the time, I don't think there's a justification to do that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Another question. So going back to the RDA requirement of 10% be set aside for affordable housing or housing assistance, you know, I think that's dumb. I don't like that at all, but that's state regulation. That's something that the state, our legislators could alter and change. If we were to move forward with this, let's say this legislative session, it's about to start, if they increase that amount, do you know if we would be grandfathered in? Would we be able to keep it at that 10%, or if the state raises it to 12% or 15%, would we have to suddenly comply with that higher amount, or could we stay at that locked-in rate?
My guess would be that it would be grandfathered in. However, the state the state granted the authority for Kaysville City to exist. They can write law to, typically when new laws are enacted, there is a grandfather clause. Whether or not the state would do that, I don't know. But one of the reasons why our 17C is 105 pages is because over the years, there have been certain types of project areas that were allowed. They're not allowed anymore, but they still need to be in the books so that, there's an understanding of how they came to be and what those regulations are. So would they choose to implement that retroactively rather than grandfathering in? I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Jackson. Councilmember Hunt?
I've talked about this a lot this week. I don't know that there's much more that I can say that a lot of the people in the room haven't already heard. There are definitely pros to this, potential cons. My biggest concern is just, those residential properties, and I don't ever really want to do something that causes our residents to feel anxious, like we're doing something. I mean, the city does a lot of things. The city does a lot of things, and they affect a lot of people. I don't ever want our residents to feel like we're doing something that may drive them out of their property or, make it unbearable to live here, because it's a great place. And I've had people who've had to move out for various reasons within the neighborhood I live in, who had contributed, to the city for 30 years in teaching at the high school, and they had to move because we didn't have housing that was compatible kind of with their stage in life. So I guess I'm very cognizant of that. And so for me, while I see all the points we've made and agree with a lot of them, I kind of feel more towards continuing to talk about this. One of our residents suggested that we wait 3 or 4 months. We did a training on RDAs just was it last week, Melinda? And I asked the question, do you feel like an existing RDA would be grandfathered? And like Melinda said, there's just no way of knowing, but I would err on the side of being grandfathered in because it has happened already multiple times with this law, correct? In 1993 and probably other times. So I think if we want to continue it, I wouldn't continue it for a very long time, but to give us more time to help educate and consider, the last kind of few points that residents want to bring up before we pull the trigger on this, but especially so that no residents are feeling uncomfortable with a decision that we're making. So, I think that's kind of where I am.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Adams?
You can go first.
Adams, Blackman?
Age before beauty.
Thanks a lot. So, budget is, as a council member, my most important job that I do up here is budget, 100%. I think it's my highest priority, and the fact that I'm cheap to a fault, it makes it very difficult for this council to work with me sometimes. But as I looked at this, there are 6 things that a city actually really needs to provide, and those are the essential things. But I've also learned there's a 7th thing, and that's called community. And I'm going to give an example. If it was up to me when I first got on this council, I would have signed off to say, let's tear down that library, because it is literally falling down inside of itself. It is deteriorating. It's not fit for human habitation. But I have been convinced by council members and community members that we probably need to try to save the library. But we need to turn it into an asset rather than a liability. And I thought, okay, so I like to try to figure out ways to fix things, not to just say, oh yeah, that's a problem. So I said, why don't we send out an RDA to the public and see if we can do a private-public partnership with somebody to see if they want to bring a business to Kaysville in our library there. We did so. We sent out an RFP. We got a couple of people to come back in, and one of them wanted to do high-density housing all across Main Street, and we said, on this block right here, all the way to First East. We said, no, that's not what we want. That's not what we see for our community. Then we had another one come in, and they wanted to do a food court. And we thought, you know what? That's part of what the people have asked for. That makes sense. Let's do a public-private partnership with them. We worked on it. They went back through there, looked at it all and looked at everything and came back and says, we can't do this. We can't make it work. So we're no longer in partner with them. It's back to a public partnership with you and us. And I keep thinking, how are we going to pay for this? It's going to be $2 million. That's the estimates of $2 million just to get to that building to the point where we can possibly even start looking at habitating it again and renting it or doing whatever we choose to do with it, to turn it into an asset and not a liability. Every year it sits there, it just costs more money and gets worse and worse and worse. But I'm convinced now that we want to try to save it. So I say, wait a minute. We need to partner with the school district so that we can get a gym over here, because that's what the community wants. And it's the cheapest possible way we could ever get a gym. So we want to do that. We need a fire station. We've been looking at a second fire station down on the west side for years. It's something we have to do. Nate talked about 200 North. That's $15 million to go from Main Street to Crest up to Fruit Heights is $15 million to rebuild that road and all the infrastructure. If you look at what Kaysville collects in property taxes and road tax, water, $15 million takes a long time to get to. So if you want to do all these projects and you want to do it, I says, well, everything you're talking about so far is either raising taxes, raising water rates, or increasing costs to the citizens. This tool right here says that whether we create this CRA or not, and I've been around Kaysville for a long time, we don't go out and look for development to come in. It comes to us. So generally, we don't have to make deals or do crazy things to try to bring businesses in, because they come to us usually because they want to put their businesses here, because they know it's a great place and their businesses will succeed. We want their businesses to come in. So to me, this is saying they're going to come in, they're going to redevelopment in this area. Whether we create the CRA or not, taxes will go up because the values will go up. There's only certain ways that you can get taxes, and that's through truth in taxation will allow you to increase your taxes, and new growth. New growth is improvements or new businesses being built. That's the only way you can get taxes in a city. If your values go up, usually because you have a certified tax rate, and we've seen all our real estate values go up, you don't get charged more for your taxes for the year. Your certified tax rate goes down. You don't really get more money. This right here is one of the tools that would say, whether we create the CRA or not, that money's going to be spent. Somebody's going to have to pay it. If that property goes from $1 million in valuation to $5 million valuation, they're going to pay that extra $4 million in taxes. The only difference this is this is saying we're going to partner with our school district, mosquito abatement, sewer district. We're going to partner with them to help build in our community. And so we're going to partner with them to say, we're not taking any of your money away, we're not taking anything that you're getting already. All we're going to do is on the increased amount in value, you're willing to take 40% while we get 60% so that we can reinvest it into our community without raising taxes. Now, there have been instances where they talk about you're going to have, you do bonds or whatever. We don't have any bonds right now. You can create bonds, a CRA can create bonds, and if you read Title 17C, you can sell those bonds to another entity, but you have to do it through public meetings and all that stuff. That's not what we want to do. We're trying to reinvest in our city to do things to build our community without raising taxes. So whether we do it or not, the amount of taxes that you out there are going to spend, or the commercial properties out there are going to spend, they're going to be collected. Whether we get it to do anything with it, that's totally up to whether we create a CRA or not. It's still going to be money that's going to be spent by those businesses for the improvements of those properties. So in this case, yes, there have been instances where there have been blighted areas and they've created CRAs, they've partnered with somebody to go in there to rip down all the buildings in there. The new partner comes in, builds buildings, and it doesn't go the way they thought. The city stuck their neck out, put a lot of money into the investment, it didn't work out, and yes, they were left holding the bag. But those are usually in areas where you're talking in large cities where they're going in and tearing down blocks because they are blighted areas. That's not what we want to do. That's not what we're doing here. We're just trying to find an avenue to help do things like fix the library, put a mid-block crossing there so people can park over here and go over and use the businesses without raising your taxes on money that's already going to be collected.
Thank you, Councilmember Blackham. Great explanation. Councilmember Adams.
Exclamation point. Yeah, I mean, that's why I love all of my fellow council members, because they've literally said everything that I was going to say. Just turn my mic off. So I'll add just maybe one or two things. I mean, I think I was going to talk about the fact that I was just dumbfounded with the cost to replace the water pipe that's going down 200, and then there's also another one that's going down by the cemetery. And I can't remember, but it came back at like 20 million for the one that's, you need to remember that stuff for me.
The one over,
Talking about 200 North.
4 blocks of 200 North was $1.4 million.
1.4
The
million.
estimate was 1.4, and then the quote came back at 2.
2 million.
So, I mean, it's incredibly expensive, and I think you should know that we are stewards of your money, and this, I'm not trying to play some ageism on the folks that are here tonight, but I will say that you're one of our primary concerns, because I know that so many of you are on a budget, just like all of us are, and the idea of raising your taxes makes me sick to my stomach. And every year when we have to decide, are we going to raise your taxes to pay for these things, it makes it harder and harder for me to accept the idea of the city paying to do things that I want to do, which are things like revitalize the library. And so when a development came to us 6 or 8 months ago that involved a hotel going in, I thought, that could be awesome, because we're going to get some money that's going to help us be able to not have to raise everybody's taxes. And then the idea of being able to capture some of the money that the school board and the county are going to naturally gather from that business going in and use it to revitalize our community, it just seemed like an absolute no-brainer. If you look at Jason's example with Smith's, there was $37,000 in property taxes coming in. Before Smith's, after, they were paying $137,000. That $100,000, imagine if that's similar with a hotel or something similar, that now we'd be able to use towards things like the old library. And I want to make sure it's so crystal clear that we're not going to rezone properties. Like, this is not a rezoning. Anything that's on that highlighted map is zoned as it's zoned, and in order to get it rezoned, you'd have to come in here and file it. And I promise you, if you're one house sitting amongst a bunch of others and you come in here and want to rezone to a commercial, we're going to take that into consideration. But if 5 neighbors thought, hey, let's all sell our houses and to some senior citizen community center, and they thought, hey, but if the city will pitch in a couple $100,000 to do the infrastructure for that, that's where we could use this money for, because you're part of that area. And that would be something that you could take advantage of by living in the area. And I hope that makes sense. Like, it to me is not, it's not going to be a detriment to you. If anything, it will be a positive thing moving forward. If at any point in time you decide to sell your home or gather with other residents to create a commercial site, which I see some people doing on 200 North, and I think that it's a possibility moving down the road. And that's probably why I wouldn't suggest removing those homes from the area, because right now it doesn't change anything to those homes, but moving forward it could be a big boon for you. It really could, and it gives you the advantage to take advantage of some of these funds. So that's why I'm voting for this, and I hope you all understand that that we're doing our best actually to prevent taxes from going up. And I think we should do more hot air balloons or something to, incidentally, thank you for being here on a Thursday night with us. We have to be here, and oftentimes we're talking to 4 people, and this just having the oxygen, extra oxygen in the room, to me is invigorating. And so please continue to come over and over again.
Okay, thank you all so much. To your point, Becky, I was just going to mention, so the city does have email addresses for utility users, but that information is private. So as council members, we do not have access to that information. So as much as we would love to just be able to share with everybody all of our random thoughts and ideas, we can't do it by using city owned property like email or contact information. So we don't get your telephone numbers, your addresses, or any contact information as council members. What we do try to do is reach out. The city posts on the website, we post on Facebook, individually we post, but if you have a great idea, please share it, because we would love to be able to communicate to people. And it really depends on where they're at. Some people are on social media, some people aren't. So we do have a city newsletter, but we want to increase that always. So appreciate the conversation, everybody. At this point in time, we need to make some sort of a decision. So is someone prepared to make some sort of motion regarding action item 6B?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Hunt.
Just kind of in light of the conversation we've had, I'd like to make a motion that we continue, not table, because continuing, I think, indicates a more proactive, like tabling, you can table something and it can be gone forever. But I would like to continue to talk about this, but I would like to continue this conversation of action item 6C, approval of an interlocal agreement between the Kaysville Redevelopment Agency and Kaysville City for the Kaysville City Center Community Reinvestment Plan and budget. And just to kind of justify that, to say that, it's not very often we pack this room twice, so I feel like if there's still this much confusion, it may be a good idea to continue the conversation and maybe engage
Okay.
in another.
Point of clarification, it would be 6B. So
My
can
bad,
we-
6B,
Okay.
sorry. 6B, an ordinance adopting the Kaysville City Center Community Reinvestment Plan and Budget. I
I'll
apologize.
second. I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Okay, Councilmember Oaks. I think I'm on you, right?
Well, we can, sorry, point of clarification, Mayor Tran. Councilmember Hunt made her recommendation, I seconded it, right? Can we have a discussion?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Discussion.
so within that discussion, if that's okay, I would just like to say that I'm comfortable tonight voting for this, but also I like the idea of everybody being here for two times in a row, maybe 3 times if we can get you here again. But to me, we've worked really hard on this, and it's okay to go a couple more weeks if we need to make sure that everybody feels very comfortable and comes into the meeting and leaves the meeting without being anxious. So that's important enough to me and why I seconded the motion.
Councilmember Oaks.
And I guess I would like to vote tonight because I don't know what the plan is. You know, I understand the motion and do it and just talk, but that just means what's going to happen between now and the next council meeting that might change the opportunity, what other opportunities to talk or to expound or answer questions. And I'm not sure what's on the, there's nothing obviously on the books for that.
The only thing I don't see a downside to this, but I'm not Mr. Saunders, and I don't own his property right there. I don't have anything that scares me to do this about his property, but he does. I don't want him to feel negative. I don't want people who own property in there to feel negative. If it means we have to wait for a couple more weeks, I don't have a problem with that either. As I told you before, I've been doing this for 4 years. If it takes 2 more weeks, I don't care what 2 more weeks does or a month or whatever. If it makes guys like him feel more comfortable to understand that it doesn't really change it. And so, I'm obviously for it. I'm going to vote for it. But if it means waiting a couple weeks so people who own property within it feel more comfortable about it, so be it.
Okay, I was just going to make, I have a question. So from what I'm hearing from our residents that have homes that are within this area, and maybe I'm wrong, but I summarizing your feelings, it sounds like the only way you would really truly feel comfortable is if your homes were not included in this area. Is that probably true? Or would continue discussions, because I think we do need some clarification in terms of, Councilmember Hunt, is your intention to have a circle back and go back to the county and change the CRA plan? Or is it that we really want to be able to spend more time talking to property owners to explain exactly and answer any questions regarding how it could potentially affect your property or you individually as property owners?
Yeah, I think that's my intention. Perhaps if during that time we decided to go back to the county, but my intention really is to raise the comfort level with this and ensure that the residents really understand, just because I think there's still some confusion.
Okay, Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed during this time frame to talk to the county and to get their assessment on this, and because I don't know if we have a right to put people's homes on this sort of a plan. It just muddies it up, and I understand what Councilmember Adams said, but homeowners could still do that in the future, essentially.
They just couldn't, they wouldn't be able to access funds from the CRA because they wouldn't be in the project area anymore. And so if you did have, from a benefit standpoint to homeowners, I think something they should think about is that this isn't forcing them to rezone their home, it isn't forcing them to sell. In fact, they'd still have to go through the whole process. But the benefit could be that if they did, in fact, decide they wanted to sell, say they're sick of backing out onto 200 North because it's become so busy, there's a chance that they could actually have money given from the city, from the CRA to benefit them to sell that, if that makes sense. And so it's like, it seems to me like it's something you'd want to actually grab onto. It's not going to increase your property tax because you're still a home, you're not a business. I would want to be part of, if they could stretch it over to my house, I would want to be part of it just to know that, hey, I can actually use this as a tool in the future to be able to benefit my home and myself. So.
Well, and to your point, even like was mentioned, we have homes on Main Street that are dental offices now or business offices. So it could potentially be used for, if people chose to change the use. Not suggesting anyone would, but, okay, so,
Well,
go ahead, Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, and actually, I do see your point, and I think it does add another tool. Really, it could probably benefit property owners and maybe get a more lucrative deal or something in the future, I guess. But I would, in this time period, like to talk to each property owner with the homes, because that's really my issue. A lot of these others, I get a little worried putting this off too much because tonight was pretty clear on a lot of stuff. There might be a few areas that weren't clear, but the problem is we put this off and we get the same questions every other day, and then people are putting out misinformation like crazy, or it's slightly true, slightly off. It's making everyone upset. And, you know, there's always a rhythm that goes to everything. And we're in a rhythm right now. We're at this moment to decide how do we want the future of the city to look like. And you're going to be a part of it every single step of the way. That's not going to change. Most won't even realize what happened. And so I am inclined to I'm strongly in favor of this sort of thing, but I want to address the needs of the homeowners. So.
Okay, has everyone had an opportunity to discuss? Okay. Who's,
I'll
okay,
say
Councilmember Oaks, okay.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Thank you, council. So based upon that decision, 6C. is
I'll make.
Okay, we need a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, and I don't know if I need to make a motion about the later on meeting. Maybe we have to do that in and of itself. Do we have to do that in and of itself?
We have to convene as a board and then make a motion.
Okay. So, yeah, I'll make a motion that we follow the same suit with action item 6C.
I'll second.
Okay, Councilmember Blackham.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you, council. All right, council member reports. Anyone have anything that they'd like to share in terms of updates? Skip.
I do. On Tuesday morning, the mayor and I attended our small business, our monthly small business meeting we have that Mindy puts on. And when I first started attending those 3 years ago, there were times we'd get 2 small businesses or maybe 3, or, you know, and how many people do we have? We had 25 people, you know, maybe 25 people there on Tuesday. So hats off to the staff for what they've done to just the liaisons between small businesses and us being able to tell them as a city what we're doing and them asking questions. I think our staff has done a wonderful job with that. So.
And I got one. Just Councilmember Hunt and I were able to attend a ribbon cutting yesterday for the new teen center that's over at Davis High. I don't know if you know what those are for or what they're about, but they're basically, they're not truly a homeless area for teens, but what they do is if they're not getting something at home or they're having problems at home, there's a place over there that they can come in and wash their clothes, they can shower, they can do homework. If they didn't get a meal, there's food over there that they can have. I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You don't know. I mean, fortunately, I grew up in a family that I never had to experience that. But I can't think of nothing worse than getting up in the morning and not really having any food or anything. But they want these kids to stay in school. And I think this is the 10th or 11th one, isn't it, Council? 10th one?
That's the last high school.
In the last high school in Davis County to get one. And you think, oh, yeah. But when you go see what it is and what they're doing for these teens to try to help them and keep them in school and make sure they're studying for their tests and getting through high school, it's pretty amazing. And it just goes to show you how the community around here really cares about each other.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, Mayor?
Councilmember Hunt.
I was doing the math earlier today, and I think this meeting is my 8th event or meeting for City Council this week. So there's been a lot going on, and I just want to applaud all of the council members. You know, we put in a lot of work. Ribbon cuttings are fun, so maybe I shouldn't have counted those, but there was that one. There was the Ogden Clinic one. There was an open house put on. So there's been a lot going on, and I guess I just encourage you to keep being involved. And people have asked about how they can get informed. We have a sign up on our website, right, where they can start getting, is it possible that, because I wanted to show people, but I never know, I can't find it. So if we can show them where it is, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so, and that is very helpful if the residents do take some initiative, and, right, these agendas then would be sent out to them. They could look at what interests them, if there's things that doesn't interest them. But you just come to that homepage, you click on that, let's just go back, so there's this little text message box, receive notifications, you put your email address in, and then you select those areas of interest that you would have. So, and then when we post an agenda, that essentially gets automatically emailed out to people who sign up for City Council agenda or Planning Commission agenda or RDA agenda. So we always love to have our residents be well informed. We can't possibly go out there and knock every single door and talk to every single resident, but this is one way that the residents can help be informed with their own initiative. You can also go to, I mean, there's a variety of other areas that you could go to sign up for public hearing notices or public meeting notices. The state has a website, but I think this would be the most direct way for people to sign up.
Thank you so much. All right, Jason, sorry, we are pushing up to 10. We didn't leave you a lot of time.
Perfect. I got a lot of items. I'll try to be quick. Train horns. So we all know that we're part of the quiet zone that runs from Salt Lake to Ogden. There are only 2 deficient crossings in Salt Lake and in North Salt Lake. Those are still several months away from being fixed, just because of the time it takes to construct those. They have, North Salt Lake and Salt Lake have both submitted waiver requests from the Federal Railroad Association to allow the horns just to honk at those 2 deficient crossings in Salt Lake and North Salt Lake rather than through the entire quiet zone, which we're all painfully aware of. So the public comment period on those waivers goes through next Tuesday, and then we'll supposedly hear back on whether those waivers will be granted. So if they are granted, then it will be quiet, at least up in our area here. So that would be great. Also, the Crestwood and 89 intersections, those are complete. We've added a 4-way stop on the south side. So that's good news. That was just this week. The big 200 North construction project will start on January 27th, so a week from Monday. That's the project that's going to run from Main Street up to Fruit Heights. So phase 1 will start in a week and a half. You'll start to see some lane adjustments around Main Street as that approaches into this area from Main Street going east. Some lane adjustments there. So that's exciting. The Mutton Hollow Main Street intersection, a new signal is going to be installed there. That work will be starting in about a week and a half as well, although the traffic impact would be fairly minimal there. So just an FYI on that. I was asked to talk about the wildfire preparedness in light of all the California fires that we're seeing. There was a wildfire evacuation plan that the Davis County and the emergency management team rolled out last summer. There was a town hall meeting. All of the residents in the wildfire evacuation zone, which is most of the residents east of 89, were invited to that town hall meeting. That's going to be an annual meeting. We're looking at doing another one probably in the spring. And just, it's all about the communication plan and what you need to do to help prevent wildfires in that area. We are susceptible to that around here. There was a big fire in 2019 that affected Bountiful and Kaysville, and you might remember that. But just some things that we're doing as a city. 2 or 3 times a year, Parks and Recreation goes up and their crews clear out all the brush in the Wilderness Park. Our power department periodically goes through and clears power lines of brush, and that's all submitted to the fire department as part of our reporting. And so there's a lot of active measures we're taking as a city. The most important thing, though, that we can do as residents is to make sure we're monitoring our own property, especially if you're in that evacuation zone area up on the hillside. We're trying to communicate with those residents on an annual basis and a regular basis to look at their own properties, remove brush. In fact, there are resources that Davis County will offer to residents up there if you want the fire warden to come up and look at your property and give an assessment, give you some advice on what you can do to mitigate your risk. That resource is available, but there will be some flyers going out again in the coming months to do another one of these town hall meetings. So just wanted to make that comment. And then just another comment. So as of last Thursday, we are now being dispatched by Bountiful City. Kaysville and every city south of us through Davis County is all part of Bountiful Dispatch now. So if you call 911, rather than going to Davis County, it's going to Bountiful. No one knows any different. If you're a resident or even one of the police officers, they can't tell the difference. It's just where that dispatch call is going to. And that was done because there's concerns about the future of where, if Davis County is going to continue to provide that service. So we took the opportunity to go to Bountiful. That's a great service they're providing to us. We're really pleased with it. It was a very smooth transition, and it's been very cost effective for us as well. So that's great news. And then last, I just wanted to remind the council on February 4th, it's Tuesday, the 4th from 5:30 to 8:30 here in the council chambers, we'll have our strategic planning work session where we're going to look at the general plan, the strategic plan from a couple of years ago, and kind of look at those guiding principles in that vision statement and just kind of set some goals for the future and what we want to accomplish, some specific initiatives. So we're looking forward to that, but some more information will be emailed out to prepare for that meeting, and that's all.
Well, thank you, Jason. Appreciate everything that you do. Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we are, as a group, we are going to convene our Kaysville Redevelopment Agency Board meeting. So, do we need no, we don't need a motion. Okay.
I'll make a motion that we, did you open the meeting, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from
Second.
January 2nd.
I'll second.
Okay, Councilmember Blackham, or Adams, or Board Member Adams.
Aye.
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 Okay, minutes are approved. Item 3.
I will make a motion that we put off items 4 and 5 until, for 2 more weeks.
I think you want to do
3, 4, and 5.
Oh, sorry, took off my glasses. 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone 3, 4, and 5.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Hunt, or Board Member Hunt,
Sorry, is this,
to table.
do we, I know, but do we have a meeting in 2 weeks, or is it a fifth Thursday?
Oh, we said several, didn't we say 2 weeks, several weeks?
Well, I said 2 weeks, but it's till the next
the next-
council
Okay,
meeting.
okay, if it's till the
Sorry.
next council meeting, then aye.
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 Board meeting.
Aye.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
And we beat the 10 o'clock.
We did, we beat the 10 o'clock, good job.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
I would